Okay, I believe we're live. Hi, Evan Handler. Welcome to Game Changers.
Hi, Vicki. Nice to see you.
It's wonderful to see you, and thank you so much for doing this because I know that you haven't been feeling your best.
I'm good. I'm good now. I've made a remarkable recovery.
Well, that's excellent because I think when I spoke to you last, you were saying that you said it's not COVID. I mean, did you worry that maybe it was?
Are there people who get ill now with respiratory infections who don't worry that that's what it is?
Absolutely not. I don't need any infection to think that I have it.
So, yeah, I mean, but I have a long history of repeated respiratory infections. So it's very familiar, and at the same time, because they have a tendency not to go away, I can't help but think. But I didn't have a COVID test this time. I had one, I guess I had one a couple of weeks ago in Italy, um, when it first came upon me. Um, anyway, not having a COVID test and getting well fairly quickly is a fantastic resolution.
A friend of mine who just signed on was just in the hospital a few days ago, and he found out the person he was sharing the room with just tested positive for COVID.
Oh,
So they're not making him quarantine. They're just, telling him to be very careful. I mean, so what was flying? I have a million questions. I have political, but I have life questions for you first. What was it like to fly? Especially a long flight like
I
that.
wanted to have another computer set up so I could show you photos of a lot of
Oh,
different.
yay. Because
Um,
I can't even conceive of you. How long was the flight? The flight from Italy to LA, you're on the plane for like a day, for like a half a day, more than a half a day.
of course, I won't have. You're going to see me looking down now, trying to find photographs of things. I have a lot
That's
of
right.
photographs. I have a lot of photographs of the damage done to our house while we rented it. Um,
No. Oh.
but I don't have the photo. Oh, here we go. No, that's not it either.
Now,
Yes, it
wait
is.
a minute.
Here we go. Here we go. Here
Okay.
we go.
Okay.
This was me on one of the flights.
Okay.
You see the fans. You have these neck. There are neck fans
Oh,
you can put on to
my,
blow airflow away from yourself.
my ex-husband actually used to have those years ago. He was just paranoid.
Usually it's used for menopausal women and film sets, but I use them to fly. So we had to take two flights there and two flights back.
Okay. And what was that?
I mean, we didn't
Okay.
go
So
for
you're someone who
recreation.
has
I want
pre-existing.
people to know we didn't go for recreation. We left for Italy in mid-August.
Because.
Well, because in late July, COVID rates were skyrocketing in Los Angeles
Mhm.
and had plunged to 200 per day in a nation of 60 million in Italy.
Okay. And tell
They,
everybody, you were
they had
just
they had
telling
done
me
a,
where.
they had done a 3 month they had done a 3 month complete lockdown, but not like an American lockdown. I mean, what they did was they made laws that no one could leave their homes without permission or a documented place to go that they needed to be. And there were police on the street sending people home and fining them for being out in public. They threw people off beaches, they kept people off the streets. You were not allowed to travel from town to town or region to region. They did everything right. And we went there because we thought we're citizens of Italy. My wife is from there.
Right.
Uh, our daughter, they were planning to open schools in Los Angeles in spite of really, really
Right.
rising COVID rates. We said, we're
Mhm.
not sending her to school in person. We
Mhm.
don't want to pay private school rates to have her go to school on Zoom.
Right.
Legally, she can go to school safely in a classroom where there's almost no COVID, and we can possibly, depending on how things develop, have a kind of like life in existence in a nation that has demonstrated its willingness to do what's necessary to contain it.
Okay. Now, Evan, for
So
the
it was
for
wonderful.
3 months they had this lockdown.
Hmm.
When they Okay, tell everybody exactly where you were in Italy, the town that you were in.
Well, the region is Emilia Romagna.
Mhm.
A normal summer in Italy for my family, mostly my wife and daughter, is to go to the small seaside town called Lido di Savio,
Mm.
which is where my wife spent her summers ever since she was a child. And so now my daughter has as well. It's
Oh,
not anything that most people think of about Italy. It
I've
is
spent
like
time there.
kind of like you know, decaying, It's like the old decaying beachfront Miami Beach when all the buildings were from the 60s and 70s, but kind of dirty, not very well repaired, and it's families. It's not like wealthy people flooding the beaches, and there's no free beach. There's only colored umbrellas and chairs
Wow.
everywhere you can see because
Uh-huh.
they belong to each what's called a baño, each little bar restaurant, and you
Uh-huh.
have to pay or subscribe to sit in the chair and umbrella. There's a little strip every kilometer or two of
Mhm.
free beach, which is just where there's a lot of rocks and broken glass, where people can put down a towel if they want to, but
Lovely.
it's not how Italian summer recreation is done. There are also, little trampolines and plastic climbing structures for the kids.
Mhm.
There's ping pong tables, and everybody belongs to one of these baños
Right.
and spends all day on the beach getting as darkly tanned as they possibly can. My daughter plays with kids who have never had sunblock on their body,
Well.
and their parents just lie in the sun with those little devices or whatever
Oh,
else.
come on. They still use sun reflectors?
I think they'd use magnifying glasses if they could get their hands on them. This is like it's as if they go back to work at the end of the summer and this is their status or whatever, but
Right.
this is how they conduct themselves in the summer.
So did you get to go there at all this summer, or was there none of that
The
this?
plan was that we had to cancel all that and we were just going to stay home all summer because traveling was ill-advised. But when
Right.
we decided we were actually going to escape the United States, and
Mhm.
part of the interest for me also was to escape the election cycle and get out of here. And we made plans. We packed up our house and put it in our garage, and we left for what was going to be a year. We said we're going to spend the last couple of weeks on the beach in Italy. There's a mandatory 2-week quarantine, meaning you do not leave the apartment you're in. It's illegal to leave the apartment. You can get a significant fine for doing that.
Okay, so wait a minute, Evan. How do they manage that? How do they come up? Do they check you? Do they check your door? Do they follow you? Are they watching you?
Each region handles things differently.
Hmm.
There's what's supposed to be and there's what is. Okay? So there's a declaration you have to make upon arriving. Nobody took our declaration.
Okay.
The only thing that happened at the Bologna airport upon arrival was they pointed one of those, you know, distant thermometers at you and let you go. So we
Okay.
could have vanished into Italy and not done anything. But the
Okay.
law is you have to report to ASLA, ASL, um, and let them know you're there.
Hmm.
And then, depending on the region, they're going to either come and test you. They're going to test you when your 14 days are up.
Hmm.
Uh, we had to travel to them in the city of Ravenna to be tested, and
Hmm.
we said we're not going into the city. There's still COVID's around. We told them we didn't
Right.
have a car. We're not going anywhere. So they sent a nurse to test us about 5 days after we'd arrived, and the day before our 14 days were up. There
Oh.
are people who get checked up on by the police. That didn't happen with us.
Mhm.
There are people who've gotten fined because neighbors saw them leave the apartment or the house and reported them. But this is why we went. I wanted this.
Right.
I wanted to be someplace
By
where
the way,
people are
Evan,
taking it serious
the,
like that.
the people that watch this show now, I've been doing this every day since we went into quarantine, we're called the COVID crazies because we are all like you. I hadn't left my house in 7 months.
Well, then
No
get
one
out
came
there
in.
and realize that we were the COVID crazies there too. Because when
So,
we did start venturing out after 14 days, we
uh,
went down to the beach
mhm,
where all the kids are running around in packs of 10, jumping on each other, doing whatever they want. The style to wear the masks is either below the nose or below the chin,
oh,
including all the restaurants that were open serving food to people, masked around chin by the servers, then people making pizza in the kitchen with no masks at all. Now, meanwhile, any shop that you go into, any counter that you go to buy a coffee, they're limiting either 2 or 4 people in at a time. People are waiting on lines outside.
right.
Everybody has their mask up when they enter. So it's the weird thing of people like really, really behaving and doing what's necessary in certain surroundings and then completely not in other surroundings. And so we had our when I first saw this, I said to my wife and daughter, I said, this can't be, she can't go running around with 10 kids. And that's not why we came here. We came here to escape,
Right.
the danger.
Right.
So she became the one kid on the beach wearing a mask. And then it was like, why are you wearing that mask? It doesn't help you anyway. It doesn't protect you from anything. You know, why do you think you can get COVID from me? You know me. How could you get COVID from me? You know me. That was the most common response we hear. But also,
Wow.
I feel fine. I don't have COVID. I feel fine. Like no knowledge that people can be asymptomatic.
Right.
This is all before we got to the school where
Wait, let me just interrupt you for 1 second. How much after the 3 month lockdown did you guys arrive? How much time was there in between,
yeah,
approximately?
um, at least a couple or a few months. I'm not sure exactly.
But the numbers were still way down in Italy when you arrived.
You want me to ask my wife? Do you want me to call
Yeah,
her? Elisa?
yeah. I'd love to meet her if she wants to come talk to us.
And, you're welcome to come on screen if you want.
Yes, I would love that. I would love to meet you.
Wow, hey, she's gonna come.
Hey, I've been hearing
Hey.
about you for so long, and you're so beautiful, and it's so lovely to meet you.
Do you want to say hi
Hi.
too? Hey, my daughter's coming too.
Oh, come on, Sophia, come say hello. Hi, that's so wonderful. It's lovely to meet you both.
She loves your hair, my wife
love
says.
your hair.
Thank you.
You look beautiful.
Thank you so much.
How long after the lockdown ended did we arrive in Italy?
Ooh. So
Hmm.
Did it stop and did you?
I think it stopped in at the end of April, maybe.
End of April, so May, June, July, about 3 months after their 3 month lockdown.
And were the numbers still good when you guys got there? They must have been because you wouldn't have gone otherwise, right?
That's right. They were very good. But between deciding to go and arriving,
Right.
the daily rate of new diagnoses in Italy had gone from 200 a day to 400 a day. Okay, but that's out of a nation of 60 million.
That's still low. 400 a day.
It was still so far below LA County, it was unbelievable.
Right.
So the towns that we considered then setting up shop and living in, you know, there were like literally per day, it was sort of like 0.4 new diagnoses per day.
Wow. Okay.
And now those same towns are somewhere between 25 and 50 diagnoses per day. But I should say between when we left, I mean, I have all these notes because I was looking to see where should we look for an apartment, where should we go. So 0.2, 0.4 per day. That's nothing, you know. And,
Right.
And per 100,000, I should say. So 0.2 per 100,000. That's how mostly it's done, you know. In Los Angeles right now, you have something like 12 to 15 new diagnoses per day per 100,000.
Okay. And how many
10 per 100,000 per day is when they start to consider contact tracing difficult to accomplish, if not impossible anymore. So it sounds low, but it's actually getting into what's considered quite a treacherous range.
Right.
So when we get there, it had gone from 0.2 to 2. So we're talking about 10 times as much within a couple of weeks of deciding to go and going.
Right. And you've rented your house in LA at this point.
And then in the 2.5 months before getting home, it had gone like today I looked, and Bologna is 25 per 100,000 per day. Arezzo, where we had originally thought to go in Tuscany because it was so much lower, is 50 per 100,000 per day. And Italy has now locked down 6 regions again.
They have.
Yep.
Are they doing it with the same severity that they did the first time?
No, it's not that people can't leave their homes. It's that people can't travel in and out of that region or in and out of their particular town without permission or for work or for some kind of documented reason. They're restricting travel. So
Are they still doing public school in those places?
Well, they went from, we're jumping a little ahead 3 days before school started.
Okay.
The national decree was updated to say that it's now been decided that children in junior high school will not have to wear masks in class, only to enter the building and exit the building, and whenever they stand up from their desks, which are placed at a safe distance of 1 meter apart, measured mouth to mouth. Now think about it. If you measure from my mouth to another mouth 1 meter away, first of all, 1 meter is 3 feet 3 inches.
Yes.
It means our shoulders are about 10 inches away from each other. You're standing you're as close as you might be in any normal social situation.
Wow.
Without any distancing.
Wow.
With 25 kids and a teacher in a room, not leaving the room for 6 hours. Eating, snacking,
Talking.
screaming.
Yeah.
And so it was absurd, and we thought it was absurd,
Right.
and we became extremely uncomfortable. And we told our daughter, well, you need to wear your mask all day in school, and our other kids, a few. And then the teacher started to mock and scold the kids who wore a mask during the school day, telling them, I'm not going to have my students looking like a bunch of bandits. You take that mask down, or take that mask down when you speak to me. You can keep it on the rest of the time, but whenever you talk, you take it down, which is the opposite of what should happen, obviously.
Absolutely.
So it was insane, and the level of, we went to that nation because of what they had demonstrated, but you see that locally, I mean, I call my wife's region of Italy Iowa Italy anyway, just because it's like dead flat farmland and industry. It's nothing like the quaint rolling hills of Tuscany that people think of. It's really like, they're beautiful, beautiful farm fields, but it's relentless. It's like driving the Great Plains. It's monotonous. It doesn't change, and there are hulking, decaying buildings, and really large factories and industrial areas that also look like they were built in a bygone era. And a lot of detritus, as you pass through towns on the roads, and it's just a real, working class view of a side of Italy that most people don't see. It doesn't mean Italy's not beautiful and gorgeous. It means there's a lot of life behind that screen. So what you also see is that the mentality of some of the people and the teachers, I don't mean to insult Iowa, maybe I'm talking about Nebraska or Montana, or only certain towns in those states. But what you see is people who don't know how it's spread, who don't know that it can be asymptomatic, who won't be told to wear a mask, who don't want others to wear a mask in their presence, and you start to see, and so we
basically Trump voters.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are people who supported Berlusconi. They're people who supported Il Duce. I mean, when I've gone to gatherings with my wife's parents, with some of their old friends, the later the evening goes, the more sort of Germanic the music that they're dancing to becomes. And I think, how many of these were sympathizers? How many of these were resistors?
Yeah, that's a little scary. Yeah.
So we pulled our daughter out of school and said, well, we can't continue with this. This is, and about 2 days later, they had their first case in the school.
Oh, wow.
Surprise, surprise. And we left Italy about a week or two later, and now they've closed the high schools. They're talking about closing the junior high schools. They just really should have set up, as they had earlier, should have set up split schedules for half the kids per day with online learning, for half the other kids every other day, or total online learning. They didn't do it. What you see is it's a whole world. Not a whole world. Sorry, there's some nations that doesn't fall, but there are many, many worlds of cowardly half measures, designed mostly because people can't think of what else to do, don't want to press themselves too hard to think of what else to do, or don't want to come up against the resistance for what really needs to happen. And so you get these bumbling half measures that only lead to reversals later, and that don't really help anybody because people are too frightened to say, everybody has to stay home and the government has to pay you money to live.
So now, Evan, what do you do as somebody who just rented your house, put all your stuff in the garage? How did you get your house back? And I'm imagining this was not an easy decision to move transcontinentally again.
No, neither was an easy decision. We didn't make the first one lightly. We were terrified about the travel. I mean, I kind of was lighthearted about it, but we were really, really scared of it.
Yes. How terrifying was the experience itself? I'm mortified at the thought.
Well, listen, we did this and were able to do this because we're privileged enough to have the means to do it.
Right.
I'm talking to you from a 2,200 square foot house in a non I'm just blanking on a word, in a not hugely impressive neighborhood of Los Angeles.
Okay.
I don't live in Bel Air or north of Montana in Santa Monica. I don't live in Santa Monica at all.
Right.
I I live 5,000 feet from LAX airport. So,
Okay.
it's not, we have a very nice house. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful life, but it is not, we don't live in a mansion and we don't live in an exclusive neighborhood of Los Angeles.
Gotcha.
I am lucky in that, I say that because I think people have a distorted view of anybody who's been on a television show lives a life of, exalted
Yeah.
privilege. But
Yeah.
I live enough of a privileged life that I can afford to ride out so far a pandemic without saying, I have to go, start working a job immediately in some other field.
Right.
And where if we feel it's urgent to leave the country, we can say, okay, you know what, for the first time in our lives, we're going to buy 3 first-class tickets because Air France has a cabin on their flights which only has 4 seats.
Really?
So we can be 3 of the 4 people inhabiting this cabin on the airplane.
Wow.
And if somebody doesn't buy the 4th ticket, which they didn't, it'll be just us. There's a
Wow.
whole plane load of people behind us, but it's
Right.
as if we were on a private plane to us
Wow.
for those 11 hours. Now, the
Mhm.
shorter flight of 2 hours, you don't have that.
Right.
I had the fans and the whole thing. But for 11 hours, and we're wearing masks the whole flight. The crew is wearing masks. But yes, we bought ourselves. I don't want to. I'm just. I want to be honest with people. We did it in a way that made us feel safe. That cost us more than we'd ever spent on airline tickets, and would never do under ordinary circumstances.
Right. How,
Um,
I mean, just using the bath, I mean, we talk about this. I mean, I haven't used a public bathroom in 8 months. I mean, just the
do you
thought of,
use the restroom now, Vicky? Is it? It sounds like you've been holding it in for a long time.
I don't leave my house, Evan. I mean, I have left my house so little that I can't even tell you.
Yeah.
But seriously though, I mean, all of these things are a concern. And you, I don't know if people out there know, but you have a particular reason to have concern because you had very grave illness earlier in your life. We'll touch on that. I don't know if we should go to that now, but I mean, you had a very serious pre-existing situation.
Yeah. Well, look, we did it. We were driven to it by seeing a nation that is not doing anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and we thought, well, if we have the means and we have a place to live over there, where it seems at the moment much, much, much safer, and where they've demonstrated a will to do the right things, let's go there. Um, the one thing that we didn't anticipate, I think, was we kind of made it in our minds. We thought, well, if things go bad again there,
Mhm.
it's not like we didn't think it could, but if they
Right.
do, we can ride out a lockdown there. But as
Right.
that came to seem like, oh, that might happen here, we underestimated the 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 lack of desirability for us to be there in a borrowed apartment in this small town. We thought, you know what, if things are gonna get bad again, we have a really nice house. It
Mhm.
has a yard.
Mhm.
We don't have to leave that property. We don't have to have anybody come on that property. We can go
Mhm.
back to that life. Our
Mhm.
daughter can go to school online. And when we saw how bad the schooling was, I mean, besides the masks, the schooling was a bit of a joke. That my daughter had to take English.
Yeah.
In Italy, she had to take English, where
Right.
they told her that she must never say a lot, never use the phrase a lot. You have to say, I have many friends or I have much friends. So she would come home with these stories every day. And then Italy has this system of assigning teachers at the beginning of every school year, and they have to, and then those teachers have to shift and travel throughout the nation to find their new home, and it has seniority. If you have
Oh.
seniority, you get to choose close to your home, but if you don't have seniority yet, you have to travel far from your home,
Oh.
and so for months at the beginning of school years, they have substitute teachers until the real teacher comes. And so my daughter came home every day and she had never seen, she said, kids just screamed all through class and then they threw pencils and books out the windows and the teacher doesn't know what to do about it. She'd never seen this kind of stuff before. She
Wow.
was fascinated by misbehavior of these public schools. She said, my school is so much more. My sister, my daughter goes to this very progressive, low key Los Angeles private school
Right.
in 8th grade. And
Huh?
she said, my school is so much more strict. They would never let anybody do that. As soon as you make noise, you're told to go stand in the hall. So she saw these things that she was fascinated by. Um, but it didn't seem like she was going to be missing out on an amazing year of academic education. It was certainly going to be a year of interesting, seeing what the other kids are doing, seeing these kind of not terribly sophisticated teachers telling her to say I have much friends, um, who insisted themselves that you can't get COVID as long as the person, or everybody feels okay.
This is just all right. Well, Evan, I have a related question because I haven't had a parent with a child in school currently on today. I feel very blessed that my kids are grown and I'm not having to go through this with them. I can only imagine how difficult it was to have your daughter be locked down at the beginning of all of this and to not be able to be with friends. And now, I mean, when has that changed? So for Sophia, was it the school thing was all weird, but was there must have been some joy in being around other kids and not being alone.
She loved seeing the other kids. She loved the new group of kids. They embraced her really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I can't really emphasize enough the small town nature of this.
Mm-hmm.
She started to get taken around by some kids. Look, we live in Los Angeles. My daughter, at 12 years old, she's 13 now, but at 12 years old when we were here, she doesn't, my daughter doesn't walk around town by herself.
Right, of
There
course.
is no town where we live.
Right.
We live in a residential area of Los Angeles, but there she was hanging out with groups of kids and walking around town, and with no adult supervision. She's going and hanging out and walking to and from school with other kids, and she's never had that experience of
Right.
independence in her
Right.
life before. So of course she wanted to keep that. She was thrilled by that, and these kids are all embracing her because they don't know anything about Los Angeles. To them, anybody who lives in Los Angeles, I mean, her father happens to be an actor, but to them, everybody in Los Angeles has to be a movie star, has to live in a mansion. So when she would say, "Hi, I'm Sophia," they'd say, "I know who you are. You're that girl from America." Like everybody knew we were there the
Right.
second we landed. Everybody knew who we were and that we had arrived,
Mhm.
and so she was that girl, which also had to be seductive to her because
Absolutely.
she doesn't have that kind of status at the school she goes to. You know she's who she is.
So
So
so coming back though, and then going back to now being online and not having kids, I mean, that has to be a really tough transition back for her, I would think.
it is, and we're more strict than many other families. I mean, other from what I gather, from her friends, they are, they're hanging out together. They're hanging out together in groups.
Uh-oh, we lost your audio, Evan. Oh, come back, Evan.
We'll do some. We're not going to keep our kid totally isolated. So we've told her, well, you're going to be able to have whoever you want over, like to visit outside,
Right.
wearing masks. You
Okay.
guys can hang out in the yard wearing masks. That's what you're going to be able to do here. And yeah, if it's you can go to an outdoor mall when it's not crowded wearing masks with your friends. But you're not going to be, climbing over each other. You're not going to be indoors. You're not going to be. Um, I mean, we had people drop their kid off for a visit and say, "Listen, we have been very careful. You can rest easy. The only things we have done or that she has seen is that we took 2 vacations this summer. We shared 2 houses with other families. We had 3 sleepovers at our house, 2 sleepovers at there, and we're like, oh my God!" Like they're telling us how little they've done, and to us, it's like insanity.
My God, I can't.
Now,
I
I have
can't.
no idea, as I'm saying all this, I don't know who gets COVID. I don't know if you get COVID because you obviously do stupid things, or I don't know if you get COVID because you just happen to be an unlucky sap who wound up next to somebody else who was infected, no matter how careful you were. So, but I don't know any other way to be other than uh, my responsibility to myself and my family and the community is I'm going to limit my activities. I'm going to limit our interactions. I'm going to do as little as possible.
Okay, so wait, Evan, do you guys go to the store? Do you go to the grocery store? Because I haven't been to a store since March. Do you go
Right.
to the store?
Well, Italy and here are different. In Italy,
Okay.
we were shopping and doing everything in the store. But here, I have been to the store since March, but I mostly have food delivered.
Right. Okay.
Um, my wife has been to the store a couple of times since we got back.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think if the food delivery is available, why not do the food delivery?
So what does your
So
life look like here in LA? Like,
we avoid it, but it's not verboten. Yeah.
uh, so do you venture outside do you venture outside the compound? I mean, what's life like now that you're
Yeah,
back?
my feeling about it has changed a lot, and some of it has changed as a result of this trip too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, also just time and seeing what the nature of the virus is. I mean, I no longer. I used to really recoil from walking the neighborhood and having people pass anywhere near me.
Yes.
I feel like outdoors I'm okay. If I'm wearing a mask, I'm outdoors. You know, I don't get close to people. I don't sit and speak to people like this. I
Mm-hmm.
keep my distance, but I feel like there's no problem in me walking around outside. There's
Mm-hmm.
no problem if my kid wants to go to the beach.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is weird is when people are on five, blankets all close together at the beach, sitting and visiting. But if you want to
Right.
take a walk outside, I don't have any problem with that. I don't see it as a risky behavior.
Mhm.
Um,
I didn't do it for the first 5 months. I started speed walking with one of the COVID crazies. She's in New York. We talk on the phone, and it was the first time I went around in my neighborhood. But it took me months to feel comfortable to do that. Months.
in Italy, they have red clay tennis courts, which I hadn't played on since I was a kid. And so
Uh-huh.
I took one lesson on a red clay tennis court. But then, as soon as the colder weather comes, they put an inflatable bubble dome over it. So it's
Mm.
like playing indoors. And I
Right.
took one additional lesson with the teacher that way, and I was like a little. I mean, I made sure I was the first lesson of the day because I didn't want to be there after six people had played. It requires constant air coming in and out, otherwise it won't stay inflated.
Right.
But when the guy would want to come to the net and talk to me about, do this, do that, I was so I'm quite careful without being really super rigorously careful, if that makes any sense.
It does. Like I have like 4 doctor's appointments coming. When I go to the doctor, I get first appointment of the day. I try to make it on a Monday.
Yeah,
You know, all
yeah,
that's the way I do
yeah. No,
everything.
if I go to the doctor, I wear a mask and a shield.
Yes,
We got the whole
absolutely.
getup.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, I'm not eager to go to supermarkets anymore. I did once just before going away,
Hmm.
just to be out, just to do whatever. I thought, well, you wear a mask, you wear the shield, you're okay. And I thought, I just had contact with probably 150 people. Like, why? It just,
Wow.
why? No
Yeah.
different being in the supermarket for 40 minutes. That's, um, so
Everybody, by the way, on the thread is saying he's one of us. He's what all the COVID crazies are saying. He's one of us.
I didn't know you have live comments going on.
Oh yeah, I have. I'm looking at the live comments. Somebody said something about Italy. I wanted to read to you. My mom and brother are in Italy. The mascher, how do you say mask in Italy? The mascherina is
Mascherine.
is mandatory, or you are fined 400 to 1,000 euro. Schools are closed once more. Restaurants and bars now must be closed by 6 p.m.
Yeah, I get that the mascherine are mandatory. I get it, and most people wear them. There are huge numbers wearing them below their noses. There's a good number wearing them below their chins.
Mhm.
It's not universally adhered to. They may be getting more strict about it now, as they should. I mean, the fact is, what we went there for, they are doing. I mean, look, they became, during the time that we were there,
Mhm.
our original reason for going there was because of how careful they had been.
And then they stop being careful as
Then
soon
they
as you
stopped
got
being
there.
careful, and now they're putting it back into place. So, I'm not personally a fan of this like pendulum swing of
Mhm.
one way to the other. I think people should be more, strict and vigilant about it on a consistent basis. I think
Mhm.
governments should be providing for people so that they can do this. Uh,
Mhm.
Most people. I'm an actor, so I'm used to being out of work, perhaps for 6 months at a time before the next job comes. I have budgeted my life to accommodate for this. Um, but most people need to earn a living or have some kind of income. It's unforgivable that the United States doesn't do this.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I
Wait,
mean,
Evan, that's a provocative question. I know a lot of people in the business have gone back to work.
mhm.
Would you consider doing that now?
uh, I sure didn't think I would this soon. Um, while in Italy, I saw
Mhm.
that Liev Schreiber, who I
Mhm.
had done the film Ransom with many
Mhm.
years ago now, I saw some news story that he's in Venice, 2 hours away from where we were, about to make a movie. So I just wanted to say, hey, really, I said, hey, we're 2 hours apart. How's things? Do you need any short guys on your movie? Uh, I was making a joke, but he immediately responded and said, "Well, there's actually one scene at the beginning of the movie. It's like a 6-page scene, and I'll tell the producer and the director, and in a matter of 48 hours, they were like, yeah, come, join us." And I thought, this is a dream of mine to work in Europe, on a
Wow.
film in Venice, Italy, with
With
Liev,
Liev. Oh,
Giancarlo Giannini, and I mean, this
oh
was like, with a terrific young female director. I'm sorry, I'm not going to know her name now. Um, this was based on a Hemingway novel.
my. Mhm.
This is amazing, but it was really just as we were deciding we need to get out of here.
Mhm.
When the date for the workday came, it meant we would have had to stay for at least 2, but probably 3 to 4 more weeks just to do that day. And I wound up telling them no and getting out of there. And, I don't know how I wish them well. I don't know how they're going to be. They're supposed to start shooting in another 5 days or so from now.
Mhm.
So,
What's going
okay.
on? How is Venice? I would think Venice is crazy. Everybody's on top of each other in Venice. I can't imagine that
Yeah, but they
it's
have
not
no
COVID.
tourists. They have no cruise ships. Venice, when we left,
Mhm.
because I was looking at this, because I was thinking, because we really considered, do we stay an extra 3 or 4 weeks so I
Right.
could film?
Uh-huh.
I'm very glad we decided not to.
Mm.
Uh, Venice was one of the better places in Italy when we left.
Okay, that's
Things
interesting.
have risen significantly, like almost every place since. Um, so now I know a lot of people are working in LA. Would I go to work in LA right now?
Mhm.
I guess, well, if you had asked me 2.5 months ago, I would have said no bloody way.
Mhm.
Now I guess I would think about it and try to really investigate what protocols are they taking, how seriously are they adhering to them, what's required of me. So I guess I would not any longer rule it out necessarily completely. But of all the places in the United States,
Mhm.
although Los Angeles is not good or great by any means,
Mhm.
California and Los Angeles have done a pretty good job
Pretty good. Mhm.
of maintaining a steady, not terribly good level of
Mhm.
COVID.
Yeah.
But it's not horrible like it is in the middle of the country right now.
What I've been hearing about the sets of that my friends are working on is that the actors are very well protected. That you have your own mask and shield wrangler who follows you around and makes sure that every time you're not on, speaking on camera, you're completely protected and no one gets near you. But the crew are not being protected the same way. And so a friend of mine who's on my son's friend works on a set as a PA, and the director was exposed. They shut down the set for a day. Now everybody comes, it's on and off crazy making
I
COVID.
mean, when this started and became really apparent to us here, let's say around, I don't know, it was around March or so when we thought,
Yeah.
okay, this is really a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Beginning of March.
I said to myself then, I said, it's going to be at least a year and quite possibly 2 before I work on a set again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you do it? So Evan, you're a very creative and prolific person. Have you been working through? Have you been writing? Because I have not been writing at all. I have not used that time to be productive that way at all. I can't focus. I do the shows all the time. But so how have you been what have you been doing with your time?
Um, I laughed before because I don't think my wife views me as prolific. I don't view myself as prolific. Uh, I I have not been working and producing stuff during this pandemic. No,
Yeah.
I have really not been terribly productive um, since election day 2016. Although I'm very happy, that I had a season on Power and did some terrific projects along the way that were given to. It's not like I've hidden and haven't done work. I've done
You
some really
did
good
Fosse
stuff.
Verdon since then, yeah?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 I did that really simultaneously with Power. I was commuting to and from New York. But no, I've been in a somewhat depressive state.
This
I
is a
did a
perfect segue because we got to go here.
writing along the way where I was proposing a book about Italy, but it was before the pandemic. It was a book about my relationship to Italy as a citizen who really is a stranger.
Wow.
Originally, I wanted the title of the book to be Cittadino Straniero, Citizen Stranger, and about a guy who's never lived there, doesn't speak the language, but is seeing a side of it that Americans never see,
Wow.
and sort of reflecting on both Italy but also Americans and how what they project onto Italy and think about Italy kind of says a lot about their denial as American citizens and the way they view themselves because they're seeing such a romanticized, unrealistic version of Italy.
I was going to say before we went on the air, I was saying how in Italy all the food tastes like food and semolina is like semolina, and you were saying no, the bread is like no. Like my impression. I mean, I've been there and I've had that
A lot of
experience.
good
But
food you can have in Italy.
yes.
It's as difficult to locate as it is anywhere else. Because a lot
Wow.
of people go to Italy and think they've had the most incredible stuff and you can't get a bad meal, and they must be eating a lot of garbage and thinking it's good. Because, because I've been going to Italy for 18 years now, with my wife as a native, and going to some of the best places and also trying all kinds of places, and there's all kinds of crap there. There's a lot of things that are true. I mean, the average food, like if you walk into a train station and need a snack or a sandwich, you're going to get something much better.
Right.
On the beach, you're not relegated to like, disgusting weird nachos and prefabricated hot dogs and hamburgers. You can get much better stuff. But
Right.
but if you also have a kind of, I'm also used to eating granola and multi-grain breads with seeds in it, and you know you have to go to specialty health food stores for that stuff in Italy, and
Wow.
it makes you feel like you're in 1964 San Francisco or something. It's like a really crude, dense brick version of that. It's not like what we've come to expect, and
Right.
and you also are very much confined to what they have in that region, in that town. There's none of this international
Ah,
access to international food and variety. And look, I come from New York and Los Angeles, so I'm used to being able to,
get anything anywhere.
dial up incredible Korean, Thai food, or Japanese, whatever I want, basically. So being there, it's a much more constrained experience.
Right.
Um, and you really, you have to be happy with the local specialties. And if you want good quality ones, you have to be just as discerning about where you shop for it as anywhere else, even if the general supermarket quality is better than here.
That's really fascinating. You
It is.
touched on something, and now I have to dive in there because I know everybody's. I'm imagining that everybody is kind of sitting in wait for us to talk about what's going on
You
because
said you were
I've been
going to do
talking.
it first, and then we
I
didn't.
know, but the COVID stuff.
I
You're
didn't even
talking.
realize this was going to be live. I thought you were going to like edit this down
Oh
later.
no, we're live. We're just. This is it's going out just as we do. I know why you think that because the last time it was a podcast, it was a radio show, a podcast, and it was edited. Um,
Yeah,
although you don't.
just before we started, you said we talked a lot. We talked for a really long time last time, and I thought, oh, I guess we just talk, and then she cuts it down.
No, we just talk and everybody stays and listens is what ends up happening. So what else are they going to do? I mean, how much can we watch this? How until something change until they put up a new state? I don't want to look. And the Senate is just it's now 48-47 though. We gained a seat. But okay, so
And then yesterday, for the first time in eons, I don't do that anymore. I don't watch any television news at all.
really
No,
through this whole election process, you haven't been.
for years I haven't.
Okay, so let's talk about it because in 2016, I sat down with you the day after the election, and
Which I have no memory of whatsoever. I told you that already, but I didn't know that I was with you the day after election day. I'm really surprised. I think that probably would have been the last thing I wanted to do.
well, we had scheduled it before. We had scheduled it thinking that we were going to be celebrating the first woman president in America.
Well, that's probably exactly. I really did think that. Yes, I did.
I mean, we all did. I mean, that's what I went. My daughter voted in her first election, sure that she was voting for the
And
first.
to skip ahead a couple of questions, I was convinced yesterday,
Mhm.
not convinced, but I was really, really hopeful and bordering on confident that we were going to have an overwhelmingly large repudiation
Mhm.
of the last 4 years.
And so how, I think it's been shocking to most of us how much of the country is homophobic, racist, misogynistic. It's very disheartening to me. I can't even fathom how many people went
I don't
in there
want
and
to
pulled that.
defend anyone who supports, enables, or simply accepts
Mhm,
anything that's occurred over the last 4 years,
mhm,
or even more than 4 years,
mhm,
since Reagan. I go back that far,
mhm,
with the whole, conservative movement. At the
mhm,
same time, I wouldn't say what you just said. I
mhm.
don't think they're all homophobic, racist, whatever. They may be people who are comfortable accepting that and accepting a leader that is, but I don't necessarily believe that that's what everyone who votes for him is. I
No,
do,
I actually
I
think it all
do
comes
think, I
down to
do think,
money, Frank.
I want to finish the thought.
I,
I do think there's something curdled at their core that
mhm.
allows them to do it, but I'm not sure in every case it's that specifically labelable.
I think for the people that I know, I think it's a primarily financial decision. Everyone I know that has pulled a lever for him is somebody that puts money before humanity and is much more concerned with finance than humanity. And
And so they've done that much better, I guess.
it's
I
not that
don't
they've
understand
done
that.
that much better, but they this whole if I talk about the person I'm going to talk about, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. But like my mother calls herself an independent. An independent votes Republican. They vote Republican because they're going to pay less taxes. There's going to be less social money given out for social services, all of that stuff. It's all about that stuff. And it's quite sickening to me. Um, but the last time we were together,
That's your mother?
my mother is an independent, and yes, she has voted. Yeah, I can't. Um,
You know,
and she's a smart woman. And she believes and I said, well, what about Roe v. Wade? Oh, they won't overturn it. It wasn't in the Constitution. What they have the same rhetoric. If you talk to anybody who votes that way, the rhetoric is all the same from the top to the bottom. It's maddening to me. But Evan, I wanted to talk about what amazed me after the last election was from the very first day you prophesized, and I listened to quite a bit of it today, pretty much everything that came to pass. You said the clocks are going to roll back to pre-60s, that you saw the whole Black Lives Matter thing that was going to happen. You saw it. You said this is going to impact us for generations. And I didn't understand the magnitude of it then. I didn't realize that I thought you were a doomsayer, but pretty much everything you suspected has come to pass. And for somebody like you, who I think we should talk a little bit about your health situation and what happened to you when you were in your 20s, and uh, how the Affordable Care Act would impact someone like you and change your life from this moment forward. Um,
well, I mean, I can speak with tremendous authority about my own health history.
yeah,
I
let's
can't
do
speak
that.
with great authority about the Affordable Care Act. I don't participate in it. I
Right.
have union supplied health insurance, or I
Mhm.
did. I won't anymore because SAG changed the coverage rules during the pandemic, and I don't plan to be working anytime soon. And residual income, no matter how high it is, ages out over time. It no longer qualifies you for health insurance coverage. So I'll be losing my health insurance coverage through SAG
Mhm.
uh, next summer, I think, unless I earn $30,000 working live on a set somewhere. More than
So,
I'm not sure.
so, so if the idiot were to win, it would impact you directly.
It would impact me directly, far beyond health insurance.
Okay, so let's talk about how.
So when I was 24 years old, I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia,
Mhm,
which at the time was considered to be incurable.
mhm,
Um, there was survival rates beyond 5 years did not exceed 25% was the literature I was handed. Um, I had that episode of leukemia. I had a remission for 2 years. I then had a recurrence of the leukemia and ultimately a bone marrow transplant in 1988. Um, and I have been, considered long cured ever since then, or at least a year or two after that.
Mhm.
So it's a very unusual outcome for that era, certainly. It's an unusual outcome in general. It's
Mhm.
still a disease that has a pretty grim survival rate, although it's much improved from those days.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, the ages 24 to 29 were dominated by that, if
Mhm.
not um, if not completely erased by it. I mean, I can't say completely erased because I actually, during that remission, auditioned again and got cast in another Neil Simon play on Broadway. So each time the cancer occurred, I had to leave a Neil Simon play on Broadway, which led me to speculate on whether they were carcinogenic. Um, but essentially, yeah, the 25 to 29 were lost
Mhm.
years. And at 25, upon diagnosis, I was a kind of a thriving Broadway and off-Broadway actor in New York.
Mhm.
So I really lost 4 to 5 years of time, lost my place in line in terms of competition for jobs, um, lost my hair, lost a sense of innocence, lost my feelings of youth. It was a real harsh set of losses in a very condensed amount of time, and then kind of at 29, 30 years old, set free into the world again. And being in the original cast of 6 Degrees of Separation was kind of my big reemergence.
Mhm.
Wearing a wig, of course, because I was still playing high school or college kids.
Mhm.
Um, and
You have a great story about doing an audition and deciding whether or not to wear a wig. Do you have a story like that?
I don't remember about deciding or not to wear a wig. I know that when I would leave the house with or without wigs, the people who had last seen me with or without wouldn't recognize me. I'd have to introduce myself to people.
Mhm.
Um, people at shops would gasp in horror, thinking they had seen a double of someone they had seen earlier in the day. I remember a Pakistani guy saying to me, "There is someone else just like you." Um, um, yeah, I mean, I remember an actor who had been in Biloxi Blues with me
Mhm.
when I had become ill, reintroducing myself to him some years later, probably wearing a wig, who gasped in horror and said, I thought you were dead. Uh, uh,
God.
because I disappeared and people had heard terrible, tragic things.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, so I emerged extremely precocious in terms of a sense of vulnerability to aging and mortality,
Mhm.
and probably socially stunted in terms of a guy who was swiped out of the dating pool at 25 and thrown back in at 29 or 30.
But didn't you have a girlfriend when you got diagnosed? Did you have a girlfriend when you got
I
diagnosed?
did have it. I had a girlfriend when I was diagnosed, and she remained my girlfriend, sometimes off and on, until I got well again, and then we split up.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I was the guy who stayed with the woman and then broke up with her when I was well again. But then we got back together again after that, and ultimately she left me.
Well,
Uh,
thank goodness for that then.
it relieves me of some degree of guilt and culpability. We had a relationship that really functioned better in the crisis than it did outside the crisis.
Interesting. So I don't even know which direction, because now I'm tempted to go career stuff, but I'm feeling like I just want to talk a little bit about what's going on here in this world. Maybe we'll come back to the career stuff because that's happy stuff, and maybe we want to.
I think you were trying to relate my illness to insight into the dangers of a Trump presidency, but
I,
I don't I don't I don't think one needs, and I don't think I would have needed that illness to
Mhm.
sense the danger and the risk. I mean, um, there's still today and through yesterday's election
Mhm.
day and the whole months leading up to it, there's still a reluctance on the parts of who should be the most savvy citizens,
Mhm.
from politicians to journalists to whoever,
Mhm.
to call out what's going on, what's actually going on.
Mhm.
There's a real ingrained pressure not to say this is an authoritarian fascist takeover. This
Why do you think that is, Evan?
what's that?
Why do you think that is?
That
These
people are
smart
reluctant
people.
to do that.
Mhm.
When I imagined us talking today, because I was pretty depressed last night, I
As
feel
were we all, I think.
somewhat liberated from that today, but not.
Mhm.
I can go on and talk about why not very much, really. I feel more a limited sigh of relief than any exultation. Um, so my thoughts were I don't really want to talk to Vicki because I don't know the answers to any of these questions. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a political scientist. I don't know anything. I don't know how anybody can trip the lever for Donald Trump. I don't know
Mhm.
how anybody can trip the lever for any Republican that
Mhm.
was an enabler or participant of Donald Trump. So
Mhm.
when you looked a little puzzled as to why would you be feeling so grim, I feel grim because
No, I'm not looking at you like, why do you feel grim? I feel completely grim.
I don't take much comfort in what occurred. I feel a great sense of relief
Mhm.
in the presidential, what looks like the presidential outcome,
Mhm.
um, barring, really even more overt fascist authoritarian crackdown of some kind, which I don't think is in the offing. Um, but
Well, the GOP seems to be moving away from him. I mean, even just today when he was tweeting, they're
yes,
turning on him now.
I think we are seeing
Mhm.
in some individuals
Mhm.
where finally the actual limit occurs. Yeah, and the actual limit is they would uh, 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 they would publicly scold him if he ordered tanks into the streets and attempted an actual military coup. But
Which is
short of that, not willing to do anything except maybe make it clear that they wouldn't support that.
Mhm.
But short of that, anything and everything. So I don't see how anybody could have reelected any of those people.
Mhm.
I mean, the fact that there's still going to be, and people maybe experience some of these more mildly than others, but the fact that there can still be a Collins, that there can still be a Lindsey Graham, that there can still be a Mitch McConnell, that there can still be a Joni Ernst, any of these people, and I'm, although I can speak intelligently, I'm not well versed enough to mention any of the other number
Mhm.
who
Mhm.
are really cretinous beings
Mhm.
who were reelected, and we live in a really 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 troubled nation and troubled time. And yesterday, even if we escape the presidency, a second term of Donald Trump, yesterday confirmed that for the most part.
Mhm. Michael Moore had a wonderful uh, live broadcast today, and had a wonderful piece. And he's in a very optimistic mood today, much more so than I am. Um, what? Okay, so you're saying you're still really depressed about it and all this, and yes, the Senate is still, and the Supreme Court. Oh my God! I mean, how could that happen? How did that happen? I mean, all of this is unfathomable. Do you feel a sense of hopelessness even if Biden is to win?
Well, it's not as severe hopelessness
Mhm.
as I thought last night, as it looked like he wasn't even going to win. No, I
Right.
will feel a great sense, a great but limited sense of vindication
Mhm.
and relief that that guy will be out of the White House. That guy and all the people that he brought in there will be out of the White House.
Mhm.
But 50% of the population is okay with it,
Mhm.
to loves it.
Mhm.
So
It's
I don't feel very
terrifying.
much defeat. I mean, I feel like and I almost even feel, I don't feel any desire that it should have actually happened, the re-election. But all that stuff that whatever I said 4 years ago that you remember and I don't,
Mhm.
there are still people that don't believe that, who still look at that the way you did 4 years ago. And the fact that he didn't win a second term and didn't implement all the things that would have happened over the next 4 years means that they can safely continue to deny that it was ever intended or ever would have come to pass.
I never questioned what you that I just didn't imagine that it would have the reach that you saw. You saw it having impact for generations, and I didn't have
Well,
that
I don't know. I mean, do you
forethought.
follow Sarah Kendzior and her
No.
writings? Oh, well, you should. You should.
Mhm.
I mean, Sarah is someone who has a couple of best-selling books
Mhm.
and who has studied authoritarian regimes and
Mhm.
who has, what I said 4 years ago was not anything terribly insightful or prescient. She has said, and I guess the biggest banner she sends over and over again is, this is not a govern this is a transnational crime syndicate masquerading as a government. And the I'm that I quoted pretty accurately. The rest is going to be paraphrasing,
Mhm.
but the facade of ineptitude is
Mhm.
not accurate.
Mhm.
These people are extremely adept at what they're doing.
Mhm.
They just have no interest in governing. They don't do government because that's not what they're interested in.
Mhm.
They're interested in doing business with their criminal partners throughout the world.
Mhm.
So that's what's been going on. Look, I don't think Donald Trump is a genius of any kind. I don't think Donald Trump. The the continual, crafty implementation of authoritarianism over the last 4 years, and
Mhm.
this attempt to disable the post office, the
Mhm.
successful attempt to disable the post office,
Mhm.
um, to inhibit voting. You think this all like comes from the the miraculous mind of Donald Trump? That's Donald Trump has been a vehicle through which, and I'm not even speculating, I don't know who, but through which very skilled, very
Mhm.
knowledgeable authoritarian implementers and specialists have successfully
Mhm.
gone a very long way. And, with a population that's clearly ripe for it. I mean, those things are written about in books. I'm not, the scholar or the authors of those books, but the conditions that lay the ground for this and that
Mhm.
make it, occurring simultaneously around the world in various ways exist.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that a respite with a Joe Biden, but
Mhm.
not, but a Republican Senate is going to do much to address those underlying conditions.
Wow. I can remember 4 years ago when I was
And
mentioning.
sorry, but just to say something, and that doesn't mean that I'm a Bernie Sanders or even left of that supporter. I'm not a person who feels like it has to be a third party candidate. It has to,
Mhm.
I supported Elizabeth Warren through the primaries.
As did I. Mhm.
I don't think non-democratic, non-republican, or socialist, complete revolutionary revamping of the United States is necessary to address those conditions either.
Mhm.
But I don't know that a single term of Joe Biden with a gridlocked government because of the same uh, 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 completely corrupt and criminal Republican Senate is
Mhm.
going to allow addressing many of those things.
Point well taken. Um, you I started to think of three questions, and now I'm thinking about what you just said. That's pretty hope. Okay, so 4 years ago, you saw the civil rights movement moving back to the 60s. You saw women's rights rolling back to the 60s. You saw all of that stuff that was going to go down. Moving forward, because half the country has proven itself to be total idiots, um, does this, you don't sound very hopeful that this can undo. Has this damage that's been done, no matter what happens in this election, how do we move forward? I mean, do
You
you,
asked a few minutes ago, like, what do you think it is that keeps people from being able to accept that this actually is an authoritarian? This actually
Mhm,
is,
mhm,
an authoritarian movement. So I don't know. Like, I don't understand how somebody could see that election 4 years ago and not get
mhm,
that. That I mean, what have they been after for decades? They've been after rolling back Roe v. Wade and
mhm.
women's rights. They've been after, um, stopping marriage equality and so what else is going to happen? So when you ask, do I think that this election will change things? I mean, this election can change some things. It can change some things if three Supreme Court justices suddenly drop dead or retire. But I mean,
Well, or if they pack the court.
what?
Mhm,
Yeah, that's right, right.
mhm.
I don't like that term personally.
I don't either, but
Packing the court is what has already occurred.
mhm.
Expanding the court is, listen, well, but they don't have the Senate to do that. So, it's not even going to be an option. Um,
Really?
if there had been a Democrat and Senate wave like I had hoped, I
Mm,
would have been totally, totally, totally among those advocating for these are the first things you must do.
mhm,
You must expand the Supreme Court and get things back on sensible footing.
mhm.
And um, I'm blanking a little bit about other things, but you eliminate the Electoral College
Mhm.
and expand the Supreme Court. But I
Mhm.
mean, we're now going to have, what is it, a 6-3 court now? It's
It's not
there's
good.
there's I don't see what progressive agenda is going to be enactable. I mean, we don't know tonight. I'm not quite paranoid about that yet, but we don't know tonight whether the apparent election results are going to be implemented with the current Supreme Court.
What,
And
what,
I'll tell you something, just my own personal feelings.
mhm. That, I want to know that.
If the Supreme Court
Mhm,
doesn't invalidate votes that are
mhm,
there and
mhm.
hand the presidency again to Donald Trump, it won't be because they don't want to. It will be or aren't willing to. It'll be because they don't want it put upon them more than that they wouldn't be willing to do it if it was forced on them. It's my feeling. I mean, look,
Do you-
you had one of them come out and publicly announce, essentially, Brett Kavanaugh
Yeah.
announced that he's ready to do it. He made an announcement about the anti-democratic nature of counting votes past election day.
Mhm. Wow. I didn't hear that
So,
today, but
so I mean, look, I'm delighted that it seems that Joe Biden is going to win the election, and I
mm,
hope that Pennsylvania and Georgia go that way too, so people can see some kind of,
absolutely.
larger gap between it. And I hope that they go slinking away, silently, rather than doing terrible damage between now and January. So
That's
I
my
hope
next question for you. What's your gut on that, on how the next couple of months are going to play out?
I'm already speaking out of my depth. I'm not. I'm a thoughtful human being, but I'm not an expert in.
No, well, I'm not asking for an expert opinion. I'm just asking what your gut is. Do you have fear that there's going to be, do you have concerns about violence and him instigating
Well, what do
trouble?
you mean by concerns about violence? I mean, there are weekly police shootings
Mhm,
of unaccused people.
mhm,
There, there are weekly mass killings in the United States already. So I don't even get the question of, are you concerned about violence? The
Well, no,
violence,
I think I think it's I think the potential.
escalated violence directly attributable to Trump supporters.
Yes, I think if it goes against him, he's going to call out his lunatics, and they're going to go and say, I think they're going to go nuts. I think they're going to go nuts. I fear it. I feel it.
I mean, I won't be surprised if there's some of that. I'm not making a prediction. I'll
Mhm.
just share my thoughts with you. Are
Absolutely.
I don't have fantasies of fearing
Hmm.
mass rogue armies.
Hmm.
I don't think most of those people are all that brave. I mean, I don't think those people strutting around at shopping malls with their weapons strapped to their chest are people who are all that eager to take a bullet. I
Hmm.
think they're people who are perfectly happy to, go and show off and to shoot somebody else from a great distance.
Hmm.
But I don't really see that. I mean, you saw parades of them in their big pickup trucks honking their horns. I mean, if they
Hmm.
wanted to, they could have shot up lines of voters.
Hmm.
Um, I think we live in a really sick society with an
Hmm.
overabundance of guns, and there's going to be violence. And as has already been established, the
Hmm.
vast majority of it will be from right-wing extremists. But
Hmm.
that's nothing new. That's simply what's been going on for
Hmm.
decades already.
Hmm.
And
Yes,
they
that's true.
claim to be doing it in response to their fear of left-wing extremists. It's pretty convenient. The only reason I commit crimes is because I know those people were about to. So,
Do you think that he'll go? Do you think
I
that?
mean, I think we're already where you're asking me if I'm afraid of something that I think is already in existence.
Mhm. Well, I agree with that. Do you think
Will
that
it
he's going to?
escalate? Maybe somewhat, maybe a little bit. I guess I don't see it as becoming. But then again, is he going to call them out? Is he going to? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, he's been much more, as blatant as he's been, he's more subtle about those things. He's more like, wouldn't it be great if, you know,
Yeah, but if he finds out that he's leaving the White House and he's going to go, and if he does, he's going to jail.
no, I disagree with that.
Really?
This country has never and will never, at least as far as I can see in my lifetime, send a former president to jail. He will not be prosecuted for anything for the rest of his life.
Oh, come on. You don't think that Cuomo is going to put him behind jail? Oh, come on. Really?
Never happen.
Oh, no. That's been giving me such joy to think of that. Really?
Never happen.
Why?
Because there will be, I don't even know on the part of who, but what will win the day will
Hmm.
be the same thing that was said about Richard Nixon. The country must heal. We must put this aside. That's the American way. I don't agree with it. I think the best healing for the country is to prosecute every one of those motherfuckers.
I think he's gone too far, Evan. I don't think you can compare what he's done to what Nixon's done. He's killed hundreds of thousands of people. He's a murderer. He's a murderer.
Yeah,
I
you can't prosecute that case in a court of law.
no, that case you cannot, but there's
And
plenty.
the things he can be prosecuted, all I can tell you is my view, my I of the many things that I'm critical about the United States and the things that I've bemoaned and said we live in a sick society. We live in a society that at this moment in time I cannot imagine prosecuting a former president,
Wow.
no matter how severe his crimes. I will say one thing.
Hmm.
If he actually did shoot someone in the head on video on Fifth Avenue, he'd go to jail.
No, I don't think he will. I mean, he's like he
Short
is
of that, and
undone. He's gotten away
short of
with
that,
everything.
I don't think he will. No.
Well, he's gotten away with everything so far. But
Yeah.
to me, today just feels like a
So you
little
think they're
bit.
going to put him in jail for like income tax fraud and avoidance?
I do. I think Cuomo's gonna go after him, and I think he's gonna get him. I just think it's very personal with those two, and I just hope he gets him. I just hope he gets him. But
I would like to see him and Giuliani and Steve Bannon and
all of them.
Stephen Miller. I'd I'd like to see these people. I mean, I don't mean because of their political views. I believe they're, a criminal cabal,
Hmm.
not because of their political views, but because of their actions. Um, but I mean, look, who should be in jail tonight is the guy who took over the post at the post office, who told, who said in response to a court order, "Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I choose not to."
Hmm.
Um, so
Hmm.
yeah, but no, I don't see it. I don't think that's what. I think it's a flaw in this country, but I don't think that's what this country does.
What in your wildest, so, okay, so you don't
And
see him
I
going to
think
jail.
it won't be done because people will fear that it will appear like we're jailing our political enemies like he threatened to.
Mm. I don't think Cuomo cares about that. I don't think Cuomo cares about that. I think Cuomo's going to get after him
Is
personally,
it
but
really up to Cuomo? I mean, does the government of New York decide who
well,
gets prosecuted?
well, I mean, that's where he owes a lot of money and didn't pay his taxes, and so there's a case against him
Yeah,
there.
no, he'll pay a lot of fines.
Maybe,
I mean,
maybe.
rich people generally don't go to jail for not paying taxes. I mean, occasionally they do, but um, um, I know people who don't pay taxes.
Right.
Their regular routine is I
Mhm.
wait until they, come to me, and then my lawyer goes to them, and we threaten to sue them, and they don't have the money to defend it, and we settle for a fraction of what I owed, and that's the way I do it every year. I think it's despicable,
Wow.
but that's how thousands of Americans behave.
Hmm.
Um, so do I think Donald Trump is going to go to jail for not paying taxes?
What do you think? How do you, if this goes down the way it looks like it's going to go down?
Yeah, I don't know how to envision the next 2.5 months. I mean, I don't think there should be this lame duck period. I think what's apparent now is how dangerous it can be.
Hmm.
I go back to, look, Gary Kasparov has been very, the former chess champion and activist. What he first said, he said before Donald Trump was inaugurated,
Hmm.
before Inauguration Day, he said, Americans have just had their eyes open to the fact that their government operates on the honor system. And I don't think that should be allowed to continue.
Hmm.
There should be really clear rules and laws that the highest government officials need to adhere to, and there are not. Donald Trump has been able to do what he has done because all he has had to do has been to break norms. Fuck norms. There need to be laws
Hmm.
about how the government operates.
Hmm.
And the whole Republican Party, and they don't respect the norms, and they don't respect the laws either, because they trust that they're not really going to be prosecuted for defying them. So, I have a greater appetite for that. I'm happy to see any elected officials who break laws go to jail. I don't care if it's Democrats or Republicans.
Hmm.
Um,
It's
I,
interesting to me that as hopeless and as depressed as you were the last time I spoke to you, I feel more hopeless and depressed speaking to you today, on the verge of perhaps having Biden win. Do you see? I mean, are you
yeah,
totally are you
well,
totally
this is why I said
hopeless?
what I said to you before we started talking, and you didn't quite believe it. Is that I don't whatever I said 4 years ago that I don't remember. I
Mhm.
don't think I spoke anything close to what my concerns were. So
Mhm.
whatever I predicted or said
I
would
don't know. You
that
spoke very strong.
take
You
us into
spoke
the
very
rolled back
strongly.
decades, this and that. No, I mean what I foresaw
Hmm.
and that I think would have happened in a second Trump term
Hmm.
was a total authoritarian dismantling
Hmm.
of the entire United States government and operating system, which has actually occurred. There is
Yes.
no State Department.
Hmm.
No one works there
Hmm.
compared to what was. There's Pompeo bouncing around the world. There's no Justice Department. There's Bill Barr, who's been the personal attorney for Donald Trump to try to help him implement the illegal seizure of this election.
Hmm.
So if we escape that, it's a really good thing. But no, what was in store was a complete dismantling of the democracy of
Hmm.
the United States.
Which so much
And
has
that's
been
what I
done.
thought 4 years ago. If I
Hmm.
talked about, well, women's rights are going to get rolled back and it's really going to be a tough time for lesbian and gay rights, but that's a fraction of what I think
Mhm.
what has happened and
Mhm.
would be in store.
Mhm.
So okay, uh, and not that I'm a huge fan of the bureaucracy and think that the State Department, the way it's worked for decades, is what should be.
Mhm.
But the dismantling of that, the dismantling of alliances,
Mhm.
withdrawing from uh, 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 the Paris Accords and various environmental agreements. This is tragic stuff that
Mhm.
can be somewhat put back into place. Uh,
Well, so that's my
we've,
next
we've been
question.
we've been saved from something so much darker than
Mhm.
what I you know than what would have happened over the next 4 years if this Biden um, term comes into being.
So so there is a glimmer of hope and optimism in you slightly that that some of this can be salvaged. I'm getting here a little
Yeah,
bit.
but what I am sharing with you my continued sadness. We did
Mhm.
not see the repudiation. I mean,
Mhm.
think of what has occurred over the last 4 years.
Mhm.
Think of what every one of those Republican senators allowed to happen.
Mhm.
They almost all got reelected.
Mhm.
Okay, so the vast majority, not the vast majority, a full 50, just about 50% of the American population is okay with every bit of that. They would be happy with an authoritarian minority government. That's what they want. So
Mhm.
am I thrilled that it's been barely staved off
Mhm.
simply in the executive branch, but we actually lost seats in the House where we thought we would gain seats, where the
Mhm.
Senate is still held by that party that was ready to let this president implement a complete authoritarian deconstruction of
Mhm.
of a democracy?
Mhm.
I'm not jumping for joy.
Mhm. Yeah.
No, this is a really, really sick population
Mhm.
um, that was on the very, very, very verge of welcoming any degree of atrocity. And
We
so
talked about this before the
it's
show
been
that I had
completely now
sent.
staved off. And so all the underlying conditions that minds, more scholarly than myself can tell you, make people open to that kind of populist cruelty
Mhm.
still exist and have to be addressed.
Mhm. Yeah, we are
And I don't know that they can be under a very moderate Democrat with a
Mhm.
Republican Senate and a conservative Supreme Court. I think Joe Biden would have, I mean, his published platform
Mhm.
was one of the most progressive of any candidate. So if there had been a really overwhelming wash and they held all uh, three prongs of the government, then
Mhm.
perhaps some of those, and they did the right things,
Mhm.
then perhaps some of those things could have been addressed. But even with the good intent of Donald, of sorry, of Joe Biden,
Mhm.
he's putting forth this thing of it's now time to, treat each other with respect again. We're all Americans. We need to work together. I don't know how much of that is pablum or how much is real intent. If they had won all three branches of government, I would have
Mhm.
wanted them to go in office and be every bit as ruthless as the Republicans have been.
Mhm.
Would Joe Biden have done that? I don't know.
Mhm.
Without holding the Senate, will he do anything like that? I mean, the best Joe Biden can do now is try to cajole
Mhm.
Mitch McConnell's Senate.
Mhm.
And I mean, unless there's really a miracle or Joe Biden is really a genius, I assume what's going to happen is you're going to see what they did with Obama. He's not going to be able to appoint judges. He's not going to be able to pass legislation. seem like to many people a failure in 4 years.
Well, Obama certainly isn't considered a failure.
No, no. I mean, he had a brief period of time where he, had the but also, I mean, he's not considered a failure, but his entire agenda had to be implemented through executive order that was then reversed upon leaving office. So we'll see if Joe Biden is as aggressive as that
Mm-hmm.
and successful at implementing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a sad state of affairs if the whole country runs on executive orders with opposition parties negating each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have been great for the nation and for the world to see what a three-pronged democratic government could have done in response to what we've just seen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I just feel very sad that that opportunity is not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That so much of the population is happy with the last 4 years.
I don't understand. I really don't understand it.
And that's where I land too. I don't understand it either. I don't understand it. I mean, I've watching my second documentary about the Nexium cult. I don't understand that either.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand the people who's there on screen saying, yeah, but when you're in that situation, and they told me to, make up a story about my father, molesting me and to give them an explicit videotape that compromised me. Yeah, I really felt like I had to do it. I don't understand that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand people, except that people are very much more tribal than I identify with,
Mm-hmm.
and just feel like better the conservative guy than anybody else, and so I'm going to vote for that.
Evan, did you come from? I know the answer to this. Oh, you are so. Did you come from were your parents activists?
Yeah, I guess you'd have to say they were. I mean, not in the sense of that word means different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
So they were not people who devoted their lives. Their career was not activism.
Right.
But I come from what could be called either admirable or mockable liberal stock. I grew up, with my parents' LPs were among the Frank Sinatra and Barbra Streisand
Mm-hmm.
was Harry Belafonte and Pete Seeger singing at Carnegie Hall. I mean, I know all those songs because
Mm-hmm.
those are the records that were playing and what I played. I grew up learning. And my dad was one of the white attendees at the Martin Luther King's 1963 March on Washington. He didn't bring my 7-year-old brother because my mother was too concerned and afraid of what might happen. So, yeah, in that sense, yes. And I was just, brought up and have my own feeling that, I mean, the world should be as fair a place as a capitalist society can allow.
Mm-hmm.
That there's, I'm not against accomplishment being rewarded, but I also don't see any reason that there need to be multi-billionaires,
Mm-hmm.
billionaires at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand voters who defend the fortunes of
Mm-hmm.
billionaires against taxation,
Mm-hmm.
because it takes a lot more than the billionaires' votes to defend it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it, and I don't get people who think that, my religion is threatened if those two people can get married. It's nonsensical to me.
And that was always your thinking. You're a little younger than I am, so you're kind of 60s activism was before your time. Were you?
Yeah. And also my parents, before that, I mean, my parents did have I mean, they had more of a late 60s, they had more of a like early 70s activism, I guess. Although my father going to, the March on Washington, I don't know what that means to real
I went
activism.
to the March on Washington. Yeah.
Um, uh, uh, but um,
Did you have an awareness growing up?
well, my brother was in danger of being drafted for the Vietnam War, so
Mhm.
there was talk around the house of what's going to happen. I mean, are you going to go to college or are you going to go to Canada? That was it was like that. There was real present fear of what do we do when this government might sacrifice our child to a meaningless conflict half a world away.
Mhm.
So I mean, so my brother was going on buses to DC in his teenage years,
Mhm.
when I was just 11 or 12. But I mean,
Mhm.
but what affected me, I mean, I knew my dad had been to that march.
Mhm.
I I watched the assassination of Martin Luther King sitting home alone when I was 7 or 8 years old. I ran to the door and told my parents, not knowing what kind of news I was giving. Martin Luther King was shot, and watching their reaction to that. So um, those are the kinds of things that I remember.
Mhm.
Is that age of assassination, that age of warfare on the nightly news, that age of it being revealed that the justifications were a lie, the attempt to pervert the election of 1972, the 1968 demonstrations at the Democratic Convention, and the bizarre trials. I mean, not Aaron Sorkin's film, but the
Mhm.
actual events. And so I was interested and fascinated about that stuff. That was a lot of my reading material during my teenage years. I listened to Bob Dylan when everybody was listening to Fleetwood Mac, and so that was stuff that interested and fascinated me, and formed me.
What pulled you to perform? When did you start performing?
I mean, I always wanted to do that kind of thing, but I tell my 13-year-old daughter now, who uh, just because the nature of we have been private schooling her, not public schooling her, so there are those who watch that and condemn that, and with some justification. So we're looking at high schools now, and they're kind of like college applications, and I keep telling her, you don't need to know this stuff. You don't need to know what you want to do to choose a high school. I mean, when I was 13, I wanted to be a major league baseball player. It was a ridiculous fantasy that I wanted at 13. And then I liked playing the drums, but I was never good at those things. But I wanted to be an actor pretty much from 17 years old on, at the latest, actually. It may have even been 15 or so.
Was there a defining incident? Did something happen that kind of pushed you in that direction?
Well, the two, one is more of a joke than the other. But I used to go. My dad and I used to go to the movies. He watched westerns at home or whatever. But every once in a while he'd say, "Hey, let's go to the movies," and we'd go. And I mean, when I was really much too young to
Mhm.
to really take them in that well. I mean, we saw Serpico, we saw Dog Day Afternoon. I
Mhm.
do remember going and seeing Serpico very clearly, and I think it was like a 1972 movie. I'm not.
Mhm.
So I would have been 11.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I was very taken by these films. I mean, they were Sidney Lumet, Al Pacino collaborations. They were
Mhm.
based on true stories,
Mhm.
and they told stories. And the way I'll say this has been crystallized in my thinking much more recently than when I was 11 years old. But they told stories. I came to be fascinated by truths, getting people to look at truths they'd rather not have to look at or recognize, packaged in ways that were too entertaining to turn away from.
Ahahaha.
So that, I think, really was a driving influence through my early years as an actor on stage in New York, when I think I was known much more for doing dramatic stuff than comedy. So the fact that I've become much more familiar to people around the world from two comedies, and
Yeah,
even
but you were
eventually.
doing Neil Simon on Broadway. You were
Yeah,
doing
but that was yes, yes, but those were some of my last days on the
comedy.
New York stage,
Mhm.
which was actually I Hate Hamlet, a wonderful Paul Rudnick comedy that was in which my experience was ruined by a a drunk.
Let's tell that story, Evan, because that's a really fun story. Please tell that, because we could use a little levity here. Come on.
It's not levity for me.
It's not levity for you, but it's a wonderful story for me. I enjoy it.
During a 4-week rehearsal period, and gave one of the worst performances of my life in my first above the title romantic comedy, billing on Broadway. I left the cast of 6 Degrees of Separation to do it. It was an incredible coup to get cast in the role, and found myself in the presence of a 6'4" really, really miserably unhappy alcoholic who had a legendary career of mesmerizing performances and violent behavior.
Oh, he already had it. I didn't know that he had violent behavior.
Yeah. No, I'm not the first actor or producer or individual Nicol Williamson had struck.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
And, I found myself trying to succeed with 2 hands tied behind my back. And, it's never a good situation. Even if your director and producers and co-stars are perfect, it's never a good artistic formula if you desperately feel like you need to succeed in this opportunity in order to get another leg up on any kind of ladder, which it was for me. I was already, when I was cast in I Hate Hamlet, I was already 30 years old. I had already been a professional actor for about 13 years.
Wow.
I had never so much as kissed a girl on stage or on camera. Like, that just was not what was given to me. I was not that guy. And now it was a romantic comedy. I was a romantic lead in a romantic comedy, and here you go. This was 13 years worth of trying to get accepted in this. It wasn't that I was trying to get accepted in this way. It was a response to 13 years worth of being told that's not who we see you as. Not that was my goal. My goal would have been to be Al Pacino in Sidney Lumet films. But still,
you got to kiss a lot of girls.
You don't want to spend 17 years old to 30 years old being told that you're good for this, you're not good for that. And then suddenly, okay, here you go. Take this, run with it, and find yourself with someone that you absolutely can't operate with, because lo and behold, they're not respecting any norms.
And so what happened, Evan?
The rehearsal period was extremely volatile. Nicol quit the play twice over the course of our 4-week rehearsal period, disappearing for 3 days at a time.
I didn't know that part of the story either. Okay.
There were, frequent outbursts of anger.
Was he drinking? Was he drinking?
We were told before we started that Nicol was not drinking.
Oh, okay.
Right. So the first cast lunch, at the first rehearsal's lunch break, I have this written down eloquently in one of my books. Either maybe I'm not sure if it's Time on Fire or It's Only Temporary, but I don't remember the line. But it was something like 2 Guinness stouts, a bottle of red wine, and a snifter of brandy before going back to rehearse in the afternoon. So that was the not drinking.
Right.
And I had all the other cast members telling me, you can't do the fight rehearsals. I mean, this had huge sword battles. You can't do the fight rehearsals after lunch. You're going to lose an eye. You're going to, it was really rough and difficult, and I didn't know how to handle myself. I remember on one of the times that he disappeared and quit the production, I did go to the director. It took all my courage. My God. I went to the director and I said, listen, I don't think he should come back. But of course, he was welcomed back. But really what that conversation should have been is, I can't operate in this situation. If he comes back, I need to go. But the point I meant to make before is, whenever you're in a situation where you're not willing to surrender an opportunity because the circumstances are so bad and polluted, that's a bad situation. So yes, the more adult, sane thing to do would have been, this is a bad situation. I need to go. I can't succeed here. Instead of, I must stay and try to take my shot.
But come on, who at 30 years old, when you have the part of your career that you've been waiting for is going to, that would have been a very mature thing to do. Like, yeah. I mean, in theory, that would be a nice thing, but come on, you were getting your shot. You weren't going to do that.
Yeah. The play opened. I got really dreadful reviews, deservedly so. I mean, I have some of my really most appallingly humiliating moments of memories of being on stage. But literally, I mean, my performances with Nicol Williamson were jousting first. I mean, he would insist upon upstaging you every second of the play. And if after I had already had all the bad reviews, if I tried to stand in a different position, he would shove me out of the way. I mean, he would, whatever. So there's a big sword fight that culminates Act One,
Mhm.
and there's supposed to be a time where I run past him and he kind of flicks my sword out of the way. And instead, I saw as I was running toward him, he had his sword all the way drawn back. And as I ran by, he smacked me across the ass as hard as he could. And I ran through the doorway off the set. I told the stage manager I was leaving and wouldn't be back. And I got changed and I left the theater. And he made a speech to the audience saying it appears an actor has missed a parry and become embarrassed and left the stage. And we'll bring the curtain back up in a few minutes. So they had the intermission. My understudy took over, and I just thought, good, I'm out of that, fine, whatever. Um, but 2 days later, it was on the front page of the New York Times, the front page of the New York Post, um, which I didn't know about. I was buying a newspaper at the newsstand and saw my face staring back at me from the New York Post. And when I got home, there were 9 messages on the answering machine from CBS, NBC, every possible thing. I mean, I decided I had to leave the house. I went to Shea Stadium to watch the Mets play, and it was like a ridiculous, like, crime film, because on every cover of the New York Post is there me staring back at myself, and I'm like pulling my hat down lower and lower, uh, uh, I really thought, because it was 2 days before those stories appeared, I thought this is just a story that 500 people are going to have to tell, and that'll be that. And then it was repeated 8 months later in all the year-end issues of the happenings of the year, and so I achieved my first taste of notoriety, basically from quitting a job. Uh,
And so you were perceived as the heavy, I assume.
No, I don't think so. I mean, Alex Witchell wrote a great story in the New York Times about it that did me justice.
Hmm.
Included, she included my quotes, which I was
Hmm.
grateful for. I mean, Cindy Adams did a hit job in the New York Post because she's
Hmm.
friendly with Celeste Holm, who was just a horrible human being to have to deal with. Also a wonderful actress, as Nicol was a terrific actor. But
Hmm.
as I said in Alex Witchell's column, Nicol Williamson is a brilliant actor who the rest of us will have to continue to put up with until he finishes the job of killing himself.
God.
And apparently he died in a pretty sad state. And upon Trump's election, I wound up getting into arguments on Twitter with his son and his friend, the son of Michael Flynn. So there
Wow.
you go.
Wow, that went full circle.
Yeah, yeah.
So you walk off. How do you get your next gig? So what's your next gig after you walk off a Broadway show? I mean, it had to be, I would imagine it was challenging after that, no? Or no?
Well, uh, had it already been lined up or not? I don't think it had been finalized. No, I did my friend Brian Golyaboff's play Big Al, which is about an obsessive Al Pacino fan.
Mhm.
So I did it all made up and speaking like Al Pacino in Dog Day Afternoon. A terrific first or early play by a young guy who then went on to write a lot of television shows and film scripts himself, and was hired by James Brooks to do the first season of a sitcom that never found its stride called Sibs, with Marsha Mason, Margaret Colin, and Jamie Gertz.
Wow.
Um, but it was the last Broadway play I did.
Wow.
I did a string of 7 Broadway productions in a 9-year period, in spite of having 2 bouts of leukemia during that same period.
Wow.
And 19 '91 was the last Broadway show I did. I have since, but it was a year or two ago, for the first time got offered one, but it was a long spell. I have no idea whether there's some blacklist against Evan Handler because he left the stage of a Broadway show. But I did get offered to play the father of the role that I played in the original cast of 6 Degrees of Separation.
Oh, wow.
Remounted that with John Hickey and Allison Janney.
Wow. So Evan, so you did this James L. Brooks, but that was not a success. How did success come? What came after that?
Good question. I know I did Ron Howard's film Ransom in 1995. Oh, you know what happened? I wrote the stage play Time on Fire and told the story of my illness. I did that through 92 and 93 at Naked Angels, and then I did the off-Broadway run in 93 at Second Stage. And after that, I started getting offered more money than for an entire off-Broadway run of a play to do Time on Fire presentations at medical conferences and symposiums. And I spent a few years doing that, not just because of the money, but because I got to go and speak to groups of 200 to 4,000 physicians and hospital administrators and healthcare workers and tell them how much more difficult my survival had been than it needed to be. I mean, whoever doesn't know the tone of Time on Fire, it's a very sarcastic, angry rendition of getting well from a supposedly incurable illness that was made even more difficult to survive than it needed to be because of the horrors of the healthcare system and the lack of compassion and interpersonal skills from a lot of the people who do those jobs. Circa mid to late 1980s New York.
And so
I kind of didn't work as an actor for a few years voluntarily.
So now because now this is the second time you're leaving and you're coming back. So after you were doing these medical things and you were doing your show, how did you get back in after that?
I know I did. Dan Sullivan hired me to do an Arthur Lawrence play at Seattle Rep that was supposedly slated with Scott Rudin to come to New York as a Broadway production. That I think Liev Schreiber decided not to do or had gotten something else. And it didn't really go well in Seattle. And in fact, myself and another actor didn't even behave very well. I mean, we weren't happy with some of the other cast members, had a difficult time. And I mean, Dan Sullivan was a friend around that time, and we haven't worked together since then either, so I'm sorry to say. I didn't throw tantrums or anything. We just kind of behaved like stupid 8th grade boys, laughing and making fun of what was going on around us as the production wasn't coming together the way we would have liked it to. So that didn't work out so well. That was 95. Then I did Time on Fire in Los Angeles. I'm trying to think what came later. At some point, and I don't know when or why, I must have started working in television. But I can't point to what those jobs were in the late 90s that took me that way.
Was 6 Feet Under an early thing that you did, or was that not so? I'm trying to remember when 6 Feet Under was.
Somewhere in there I did West Wing.
Okay, by the way, I'm binging The West Wing now for the first time. I never watched it, and I am loving it so much that I can't stand it. And I had no idea you were in there, and all of a sudden I got to see the end of season 3, and there you were. And
there were a couple of jobs for which I was hired with great fanfare, like West Wing. It was me, Connie Britton, and Ron Silver. But they only used me and Connie a few times, and Ron stayed on. So it was like it looked like it was going to be a big thing, and I'm happy to have been associated with it. And those 4 episodes that I did were great. So I guess the late 90s were those kind of guest spots. That's what it was. It was those guest spots, and then I did a split season, meaning it was a mid-season replacement and then half of another season of Peter Melman's show It's Like You Know.
Okay, so I know Peter, but also my stylist, who's a very good friend of mine, was also your costumer on that. Great names, yeah. But yes, and so that
was kind of heralded at the time.
Right.
The first offshoot of Seinfeld.
Right.
It was kind of an L.A. Seinfeld. Peter had been a writer of some of the most
Mhm.
notable episodes of
Iconic, yes.
Seinfeld,
Mhm.
So, but it didn't catch on. It was also right when they started to air Who Wants to Be a Millionaire 6 nights a week. So it was the networks were just turning to unscripted material that was
Mhm.
much cheaper to produce, and we just got pushed off the schedule, and it didn't come to be.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that's the late '90s, doing that kind of stuff, getting some sort of recognition building, because I was on television and West Wing and whatever. Uh, uh, but then I was still living in New York. I was coming
Right.
to Los Angeles to do pilot seasons. And when 9/11 happened in New York,
Mhm.
uh, that was the first time that I really decided. I happened to rent a place for pilot season in Santa Monica, which for whatever reason I had never even known. I just would always go to West Hollywood or whatever, or
Mhm.
Oakwood in Burbank or something. And I
Mhm.
thought, wow, it's really awfully pleasant here. And I got an apartment and I moved all my stuff away from New York for the first time.
Mhm.
I guess this would have been early 2002.
Mhm.
And that's when I was offered to fly back to New York 4 days after moving all my stuff to Los Angeles for the first time to fly in an audition for Sex in the City.
Which is the game changer.
Yeah, I mean, I was already. It wasn't that I was unknown. I already built a quite a name for myself in New York, and was recognizable to people from film and television. But
Mhm.
absolutely yes, being on
I
Sex in
mean,
the City
because once you're in Sex and the City, then
was a
everybody knows
tremendous
you.
game changer. Yes.
Yes.
And I know that the people, who had been, I came into Sex in the City 6 years into their 7 year run. I was really only there for about 18 months with those people.
I think of you as the whole thing.
No, it was really the very end. They happened to divide those seasons into two, they stretched things out, but
Wow.
it was very late. It was a really, really, really well established, world renowned production
Right.
already. So
Right.
stepping into a society that's already in place, and I made a few glaring missteps. One of which was I behaved like what I was, which was a 40-year-old guy who'd been told since he was 17 years old that every single job I got was the one that was going to change my life. And when they all said to me, this is going to change your life, I was kind of like, yeah, 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 whatever. Let's just do our day's work and get through it, and I'll be on my way. And they didn't like that very much at all. And in fact, for the first time, they were right. I mean, that job did, it changed. I'm not even going to say that it changed my professional experience profoundly, but
Mhm.
it changed my experience walking through the world because I mean, I had not before that been shouted down on streets in any city on earth
Right.
that I would travel to. It just wasn't my thing.
Mhm.
People might stop me and say, "Hey, are you Evan Handler? I like your stuff." But
Mhm.
uh, in the days leading up to my first episodes of Sex in the City being aired,
Mhm.
so some months after I'd already been hired,
Mhm.
I had my first dates with the woman who's now my wife. And in fact, the very first few hours we spent together in Central Park. And by the time we actually went on our first official date, when I flew back to New York to see her,
Mhm.
the first couple of episodes had aired.
Mhm.
And we went to dinner near Lincoln Center and we walked to 45th Street to see a play.
Mhm.
And that 30-block walk was one of the more surreal experiences that I'd ever had. I mean, I was already 40 years old. Uh, I was with a woman that I already knew from just the few hours we'd spent together several weeks earlier, was very different than most of the women I'd been involved with, and that I had very strong inklings there was the potential for something different and better with.
Mhm.
And we couldn't make our way through Times Square because I was being surrounded
Wow.
by every
Ah,
18 to 35-year-old woman who
wow.
see me from across Times Square screaming, "Oh my God, Harry, we love you, we love you," and wanting pictures taken. And I was having these multiple experiences at once of, well, this is enjoyable, you know. I'm with a woman who I feel very differently about than anyone I've, been on the cusp of getting involved with before.
Uh-huh.
Um, feeling like two simultaneous incompatible fantasies are occurring at the same time, wondering if I could turn to her and say, like, could we pick this up again in 6 months or so? And also knowing that whatever experience she was having of our first date had to be terribly colored and influenced by what
Mhm.
she was seeing, how people were responding to me, and her
Mhm.
not knowing that this has never happened before through my 40
Ah,
years of life. This is like the first instance of this. Yet
mhm.
she's having the experience of walking down the street with someone who to her seems world famous.
Right.
So it was a very, very uh, colored courtship.
So you had to have the moment, as you started to say, where you thought, "Oh my God, I'm going to be I can be the sex god of I can have anyone, I can do whatever I." But you didn't make that choice, did you?
No, no, I didn't. Um,
Mhm.
I was not unconflicted.
Mhm.
But that's the difference between something like that happening to you. I mean, hopefully people won't take this the wrong way. I mean, I mean to mock myself, but when that happened at 40 years old,
Mhm.
uh, uh, my experience of what are we talking about? We're talking about 17 to 27 to 30. We're talking about 23 years already of
Mhm.
working as a professional, as a some degree of adult.
Mhm.
My experience for most of those 27 years
Mhm.
was that I was being deprived of something that was my due. When it happened at 40, I was clear that that wasn't the case.
Mhm.
So if it had happened, anytime much earlier, it would have been received very differently. At
Mhm.
40 years old, I was able to see, oh, this is like a toy that I can now play with
Mhm.
that has no bearing on what I deserve.
Mhm.
It's just like a light switch that got turned on all of a sudden. You know, suddenly they shined the light on me, and I mean, it was very clear to me women who suddenly came up to me in adoring fashion, who would have treated me harshly if I had dared to approach them in a bar, the week before.
Right.
It was very clear to me where it was and what it was about, and um, I'm not saying it wasn't enjoyable.
Mhm.
It was a fascinating toy to play with and experiment with, but it was received differently at 40 years old than it would have been at 27 or
Mhm.
much less 22.
Mhm. And then I imagine that continued in a different Californication, which for me, Runkle, forget about it. You had a pretty, that was a, I missed that show a lot. That was a wild show, and you did some wild things. And I would imagine that attracted a different kind of woman still.
Um, Californication was really interesting in comparison, and pretty sharp on the heels of Sex in the City. I did another show in between called Hot Properties, which didn't come off very well.
Mhm.
Um, so Californication, I was in on the ground floor. I was one of the originals and the creators of it. So we did this pilot together. David and I got along well. We said, well, that was fun, but where could you possibly take it from here? So when it got picked up, it was like, oh, cool, let's see. Tom Capanos wrote what I think is one of the more perfect seasons of television ever,
Fantastic.
the
Mhm.
first season of Californication.
Mhm.
But then even in later seasons, developed into much more of the Hank and Charlie show. It really was David Duchovney's show and that character. But somewhere toward the third or fourth season, it became a lot more of a duo,
Mhm.
um, from the ensemble that it was,
Right.
and so that was something great as well
Mhm.
for me to experience anyway.
Mhm.
And more than anything else, um, I really do see Californication as being a kind of when I, in my own estimation,
Mhm.
woke up and emerged as an actor, because the
Mhm.
stuff that I was given to do was so overwhelmingly intimidating and required such an abandonment of inhibition.
Okay, so do you have that in real? So I want to ask because you were doing crazy ass shit. Was it easy for you? Was it hard for you? Was it challenging?
No, and I think the biggest, my own self criticism as an actor is It's never, I've never been all that uninhibited. It's never been easy for me to get past that stuff. So if I were to critique, a lot of my earlier work, pre-Sex in the City,
Mhm.
to me, I would say that's a kind of like stiff guy who doesn't really know how to use his body and who, may be perfectly capable and even winning in certain roles, has real limitations and whatever. So thankfully, I had to get naked in Sex in the City and do some stuff there as well. And
Mhm.
Californication, no, I mean, I really remember very well. It was very early, and it was me and the crew left alone at about 2 a.m., where I
Uh-huh.
had to film that masturbation montage. Charlie Runkle, who gets caught, masturbating everywhere in his office from security
It's
cameras. And I thought,
hysterical.
well,
Yes.
but that quickly became, pretty much 5 to 7 fictional comedic orgasms per episode, because no matter how people perceived that show, David kind of got naked and had a sex scene once at the beginning of the season, and then it was pretty much Evan and Charlie, doing 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 the rest of that through the
Right.
rest of the season, and it was all sexual stuff that the basis of which was humiliation. It was all humiliation humor for Charlie Runkle. So I was forced to become comfortable with that, and I feel very proud of that stuff. And I feel like I don't think there's any role that nobody else could have played, but I think I grabbed hold of that and brought some life to it in a way that few others could have, and felt proud of it. And if I have any frustration since, I would have wished that turned into more immediately afterward, and people could have seen me as capable of playing the central role in shows afterward.
Mhm.
I think I was largely thrown back into the pile of actors who audition. You know, that's
Really? How
yeah.
how about like did you have to audition for Dershowitz? You did.
I wanted to audition for Barry Schreck, but was told no.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
probably only got that role because I put on the wig that I wore for Larry Fine to go to the audition.
You looked like Larry Fine. Yes, you had that
I
look.
looked like Helen Dershowitz, but I was
No,
wearing
you did look like Dershowitz, but Dershowitz looked like Larry Fine. I mean, that hair was kind of um, Larry Fine-ish. But so how was doing the Three Stooges for you? Was that
Sorry, that's something else that happened in the late 90s during that period of it's like, yes. So back to back. I did get to do that Three Stooges, which was kind of a coup because, to play I mean, those kinds of biopic movies don't happen on network television anymore. It was for ABC. They more happen on cable now, but
right?
to be welcomed into that niche of kind of like recognizable actors playing
Hmm.
leading roles in these movies or miniseries,
Hmm.
which now I've done on Too Big to Fail and People versus O.J. Simpson and Fosse Verdon, um, meant a lot to me,
Hmm.
and increased some visibility at that time anyway. So yeah, and also some great friendships from that. I mean, we went to Australia for 2 months and didn't stop doing these silly Three Stooges routines with each other, and have remained friends since then.
That's so great. The People versus OJ, maybe for me, one of the best, whatever you call them, that ever was.
Incredible, incredible project. I mean, doing it. Look, any of these things, you see one script if you see a whole script.
Hmm.
You see the pages that you used to audition, then you
Right.
see a script. And I think the big question when we're all in separate places, but you hear this cast of like John Travolta and Nathan Lane and I mean I'm going to blank on all kinds of names now, but
I saw.
my
Like
co-star
Johnny Cochran. I'm just totally spacing out.
Connie Britton again, David Schwimmer, my co-star in 6 Degrees of Separation. My God, Angela Bassett's husband. Come on, help me out. Just blanking on a name. Courtney Vance.
Yes.
Courtney
Thank
Vance.
you. Thank you. Courtney Vance was who I was trying to think of.
Um,
Yeah. Mhm.
and Sterling Brown, who was not known at the time.
Right. And he was
Sarah Paulson.
fantastic in that.
Sarah Paulson, who
And
I
what's
did
her name? Sarah Paulson was
right.
also
But
brilliant.
you're reading this and you're going, well, what is this going to be? Is this going to really work? Or is
Mm.
this going to be some kind of like Poseidon Adventure Towering Inferno camp classic? Because it was writing this style of like satire but serious, and
Mm.
so you just didn't know. But I, for I agree with you. I mean, I think it became
Brilliant.
really quite a perfectly realized
Mhm.
amalgamation of all those things. And as with many things in my life, I'm just sorry I didn't kind of seize hold more of the people I was around. And I mean, John Singleton directed one of those episodes, and I just kind of treated him as the guy who was there that week to do the job together, as opposed to gushing and telling him, I've seen your films and I just found it amazing and I'd love to talk with you. And then, he passed away not long after that. And I later learned what a mentor he'd been to so many people. So that kind of what I have always seen as respectful professional distance that I've kept
Mm.
from people, I wish I could go back and do over in certain instances.
Wow. How about, had you ever met Hal Prince before you were playing him in Fosse Bird?
No, I hadn't, and I reached out to him before learning that they were generally discouraging that. And I had one of like the golden days of my life with Hal Prince. I was invited to his office where we spent a couple of solid hours talking, and I read his book before I did, and I
Mhm.
made a list of the 25 or 30 people in his book that had also been influential in my life, and the way that I told him, I mean, our paths wouldn't have crossed because I never did musicals. Well, for
Mhm.
whatever reason, growing up as the kid who, you know, was embarrassed to sing, I just
Mhm.
never did that. And so when I was at Juilliard, even, I didn't go see On the 20th Century. I didn't go see, I did see Pippin when I was in high school. I didn't go see, his shows. I didn't go see Candide.
Mhm.
I was going to see like, I saw three dress rehearsals of Al Pacino do the basic training of Pavlo Hummel before it opened. I saw Kevin Kline do Loose Ends, Michael Weller's play at Circle in the Square three times. I saw
Mhm.
Jason Robards do Touch of the Poet three times. I was all in this head of like dramatic Broadway actor,
Mhm.
um, to sort of sarcastic leading man, and so I didn't know any of his work whatsoever. And in fact,
Wow.
I sat with him in his office and said, I've never seen one of your productions, and he said, and I bet you've never seen Phantom, have you? And I said, no, I haven't. He said, that's because you're a snob, but that's all right. And we had this great time, and we talked a lot about a guy named Bob Calfin,
Mhm.
who ran the Chelsea Theater Center and gave me my first unpaid internship,
Wow.
which is, a very loaded position nowadays. It's been revealed as a position of privilege, rightfully so.
Mhm.
But I worked for a year unpaid at Chelsea Theater Center and auditioned for their plays and got cast in them. And he had also been the producer of Candide. And he said, "Well, I'm going to see a play that he directed tonight." And I said, "I didn't even know he had anything on in New York. Would you like to come?" So we spent an hour. We spent 2 hours together in his office. We
Wow.
had dinner together at his favorite restaurant by Lincoln Center. We went to the theater together.
Wow.
We spent some weeks going back and forth on how to get together again. And then I
And
heard
he
that he
died.
had died.
Mhm.
So it was a great unrequited love
Mhm.
uh, relationship. We had one first date, and
Mhm.
I mean, it meant so much to me to be
Mhm.
accepted by him.
Mhm.
He told me that his biggest impression before meeting me was that everybody he'd mentioned my name to said, "Oh, that's a terrific actor. That's a terrific actor is going to play you." And I think I kind of, won an allegiance with him by demonstrating to him the number of people we had in common.
Mhm.
And we had a great time, so it was very sad to lose him. Obviously, people had much greater bonds to him than I did.
Mhm.
There was just a real irony in that we had that one afternoon and night of hanging out, and that was that.
Did you ever hear from Daisy, his daughter, about your performance? Do you know anything about how?
Well, I mean, I reached out to him through Daisy partly, so I knew Daisy, from just being around the block from years and years earlier. So
Mhm.
so we were connected on Facebook.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know that she. I don't remember any commentary about it.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think I didn't hear from Hal saying, uh, anything like that, but I didn't expect that. We were talking about getting together again. I had to tell Hal over and over again. All I said to Hal was, listen, Hal, your biggest disappointment when you watch this series is going to be that it's not about Hal Prince. I'm not in it that much. It's the story of Bob. But
Right.
I mean, he knew Bob, so we talked a lot about Bob Fosse. I knew Bob Fosse as the guy who did all that jazz and
Oh, yeah.
these, the kinds of things that a guy like me would have been attracted to as a teenager who wanted to get into that business and tell those kinds of dark, self-referential, self-critical stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he knew Bob as something else. He knew Bob as a choreographer who
Mm-hmm.
became a director, who
Mm-hmm.
became a big star.
So Evan, I'm just looking, like we've been talking for like hours, but so
We have, I'm sure my wife and daughter are really irritated.
I'm sure they're thrilled that they've
Get in
had to be
on this.
quiet all this time.
That's what I've been doing through this pandemic. I've been the house husband largely. I
You're a cook. You cook, right? Yeah.
yeah, my wife is working full time online. My wife is a college chemistry professor, and
Mm-hmm.
she's doing her job online. My daughter goes to school online,
Mm-hmm.
and so I, do a lot of the cooking and keeping things together around the house.
You're quite a cook from what I remember seeing things on Facebook. Like not
We can whip up a few things here. Yeah.
yeah. And you had I like that you have a very well stocked kitchen, as I seem to recall. You have many ingredients in your home at all times, so that
My
you're
wife
prepared.
published photos of our pasta drawer because we have, it used to be floor to ceiling, the different shapes and backlog of pastas. We downsized a bit and put it in a very deep pull-out drawer.
So Evan, if you could do one role, I have two questions. Is there anything that you've played to date that is the most like you of all the roles that you've had?
Uh, I don't know how to answer that.
Well, maybe there isn't. Maybe there isn't one that
I
is
think it's an
like you.
amalgam. I mean,
Mhm.
I think there's aspects of me that are Harry Goldenblatt. There's aspects of me that were Shrug from It's
Mhm.
Like, there's aspects that, probably are like Doug, the lawyer from West Wing, where everybody had to say, I think what Doug means is, he couldn't express himself diplomatically.
Mhm.
I think it's, you try to use slices of yourself. I think, yeah.
Is there a stage role that you've coveted throughout
Well,
your?
there was a period when I was trying to start to work in Europe and work in London, and periods where I thought, well, w- am I able at this moment to be able to convince anybody to build something around me? I mean, the people that I met in London were convinced that the way to do things in London would be, because I was known from two television shows, would be
Mhm.
to propose a production that I wanted someone to build around me. I never really bought that that would fly. But
Mhm.
at that time, the first thing I thought of was, well, years ago, I got offered to do one of the more recent productions, and this is before the most recent successful Broadway one, at the Public Theater of Normal Heart. Larry Kramer's play Normal Heart.
Mhm.
And that play is very meaningful to me because I knew Larry. Larry approached me based on my illness history when he
Wow.
was diagnosed, and was very terrified, and came to me wanting to know how to deal with doctors and what his descent into the medical world was going to be like. And I'm
Wow.
a little embarrassed to say I didn't see the original production. I went home and read it after that. And I
Mhm.
thought, good God, I mean, when I read that play, I thought this man is a heroic figure who has outlined his history of heroism in
Mhm.
his community.
Mhm.
And he's coming to me for advice and guidance. I was really blown away by that.
Mhm.
And when they did the production at the public, apparently Larry said, Evan Handler is the guy you have to get. Sorry, I'm sorry. He said you have to get Tom Cruise. That's the only person I'll approve. And when they said, Larry, that's completely unrealistic. Tom Cruise is not going to come. He said, then it has to be Evan Handler. And I, was so moved by that. Although I was terrified of the role, actually. Never saw a production of the play, and I would read it and I'd go, I don't quite know how to do this without just being a shrieking, angry person from A to Z. But it was offered to me just as me and my new wife had already planned to move to Los Angeles. Like everything was in place. We would have had to cancel the move and stay in New York, and I turned it down.
Mm.
So when I was thinking of what I could pitch in London, I did say to the agents there, to some theaters, I said, well, what would you think about The Normal Heart? I mean, it was done very successfully a few years ago on Broadway.
Mhm.
Sorry to say, look, I would have loved to have been involved in that production. I was
Mm.
very jealous of Joe Mantello.
Mm.
We were going in and out of a room auditioning for the role he played in Angels in America. And
Wow.
there's no one else who should have played that role other than Joe Mantello.
Mm.
And when he did Normal Heart so successfully, I was envious. But when they did the first reading, I was offered if I wanted to fly to New York to do the smallest role, and I didn't do it. And there are certain things you should push yourself to do, even if you feel you're not being given as much to do in it as you think you should. So I've bemoaned my lack of involvement with that very important play, because also as I read it, one of the characters in it, the doctor in the wheelchair, is actually a doctor that I knew in New York,
Wow.
who would cover for my hematologist. So she was someone that I existed with as a patient.
Wow.
So um, that never got off the ground. People didn't respond. I
Mm.
probably didn't push it as aggressively and ambitiously as I should have.
Mm.
And I just saw online, it's scheduled now for January 2021 at the National Theatre in London, is Larry Kramer's Normal Heart, all cast
Wow.
and put together. And it's a role that I believe I'm too, I've aged out. It's written for a 30, 35-year-old guy. I probably could have done it right up until I was 50.
Mm.
But maybe even into my 50s. But it's, that's, it puts, it's not a role for a guy of my age, ideally. So yes, I'm sorry that I never played that role.
Okay, so that's two questions you answered. Any regrets and any role you'd like to play. But okay, but there's a whole big future out there, and you are who you are. I mean, any classics, anything that that you could conceivably do in the future?
I have been talking for the last few years to um, um, the artistic director of the Old Globe in San Diego, about doing something, and they've come my way a couple of times, but they haven't been times that I could do it. But yeah, I mean, look, I'd like to play Richard III, which I'm like probably just about too old for anyway now. But generally, people climb the ladder of these things and don't, start off with one of the heaviest, hardest hitting things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an aspect of things that I was trained to do, but didn't end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would like to do stuff like that. I would, and yeah, may still. Let's see.
Did you ever have you considered writing something like a vehicle for yourself for TV or anything like that? Is that
Yes, but I really don't consider myself. I'm certainly not an experienced script writer, So I don't. I did a screenplay adaptation of Time on Fire that came out pretty well and was welcomed in certain places, but never produced. Um, but I don't consider myself primarily that, so I haven't done that. I think about it sometimes, but I don't know that that's my forte to that extent.
that I'm still seeing you as that leading role in that television show that should have come after?
Look, I have a high school friend who became a successful screenwriter. He was the original writer on Ronin, which then David Mamet rewrote, but he designed before Quibi existed.
Mhm.
He started pitching his idea for a 10-minute series. Sorry, 10-minute installment series,
Wow.
which then he turned into more of a series or even a screenplay that I thought was terrific. That told the story of a data analyst,
Mm-hmm.
who comes across something he shouldn't, and gets kind of the unlikeliest guy to have to physically fight for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Spends a night in a building besieged by attackers
Mm-hmm.
who are coming at him only because of whatever he stumbled upon,
Mm-hmm.
and whose only salvation would be to get the information out to other people.
Mm-hmm.
That I thought was terrific. That got pitched around a bit. So yeah, would I like to hold the center of things like that? Absolutely. Would I like to play any number of uh, 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 jaded, gone to seed lawyers or prosecutors? Yeah, but you know, I've had a weird, you know, I've looked much younger than I am for most of my life,
Mhm.
and probably still have some time because of the shaved head to come into the next age range that I'm going to play. So I'm not despairing about anything. I think there'll be lots of opportunities to come.
I'm sure there'll be lots of opportunities to come. Okay, so last question, because I just happened to see it in the comments. Tony wants to know, since you're not watching TV, what are you reading these days? You reading something?
I do watch some TV.
Oh,
I
oh,
just
you
haven't.
just don't watch the news. You just don't
No,
watch the
no, no.
news.
Oh no, I do watch television. I don't watch a lot, but no, I haven't watched television news in eons
Mhm.
and eons and eons. I took, you know, MSNBC, CNN, eh, all network, any television news source has not been my source of news for years.
Okay, so what are you binging? What have you binged that you have you seen Queen's Gambit yet, by the way?
I just started watching some of it last night. You know, the problem is we don't spend a lot of time watching television, and we have a 13-year-old kid, so
Mhm.
a lot of it gets geared toward that. We just watched the full season of The Haunting of uh, uh, not The Haunting of Hill House, but The Haunting of something Manor.
Which is
It's a
like another version of, is that the one
The
that's the
Haunting
other?
of Hill House was the first season.
Right.
It's an anthology series, and so we watched the
Mhm.
second season. So a lot of it's geared toward what can we all watch together.
Hmm.
I did spend a while late at night some weeks ago watching some of the first three seasons or so of Call My Agent is a French series.
I've heard wonderful things about that. I
Very good,
haven't seen
very
it.
good, very good. But you know, my wife also falls to sleep very, very, very early. So our 1 hour of watching after our daughter, and our daughter doesn't go to sleep so early anymore. So it used to be
Mhm.
1 hour of our watching at night before we fell asleep. So we had watched a lot of Homeland, but we haven't watched the most recent series. But Better Call Saul was huge on my list. But I've
Mhm.
fallen behind on all these things. The
Mhm.
Crown we had started.
Mhm.
Um, but more recently, it's been harder to do that stuff. So I'm even more behind on a lot of it.
Well, Evan, thank you so much for doing this. And I'm glad that we've come to here because I'm in a much more serene and sane place than I was about an hour ago when I wanted to jump out my window. But I appreciate your perspective and your willingness to talk to me about it. And I,
Pop your bubble. That's that's pretty much what I've been known for a lot of my life.
for what? Oh, popping the bubble?
Pop your bubble. Yeah, yeah.
Well, well, I hope that I hope that things become a lot more optimistic than you think they will. I hope there's some hope out there for us. And
I think there's a lot of work to do, and a lot of people really, really, really did it through this election season, and hopefully that will be continued.
I think one thing, if you and that's sparking on it, the activism that's come out of this. More people voted in this election than have ever voted before. Joe Biden has gotten more votes than any president in the history of our country. That's that's exciting to me. That's a hopeful sign. And I think the way we bluers have united is a hopeful thing. I think people are more willing. Look, a lot of people were getting out there and they were demonstrating in the middle of COVID. It was my daughter was in the middle of it in New York. I mean, it was scary to me, but
Well, it's also really exciting that, well, you have to take it two ways. A lot of the most progressive office holders in Congress got reelected. I
mhm.
think any of the new candidates who were very progressive got kind of blown away. Um, so, you know, look, we live in a very in a not terribly liberal nation, if you're going to take it as a whole.
Mhm.
Um, so, uh, accomplishing everything will require a lot of compromise. I think the danger of insisting upon very rapid change is that the people who, when it's not accomplished, or the people who get left out, fall prey to the kind of populist regressive appeals. But
Well,
anyway, I don't want to bring you down again before we
here I
start.
go. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna end on that. You have a beautiful family. I'm glad that you're home safe and that your daughter's doing school from home and will
And
safely
what we
be doing.
didn't, what I didn't quite get to when we touched on it before, when we talked about my parents and my upbringing, you know, I have felt so grateful through this period as I've seen so many talking about their horrible holiday gatherings and the
Mm,
parents who've been lost to
mm,
Fox News. You know, I don't have any. I have fantastically liberal, progressive parents who
mm.
made sure to vote in the state of North Carolina, and who uh, brought me up to understand humanism and a humanist outlook on life. And I'm very, very, very grateful for that, and that I don't have these horrible, treacherous, dreaded family gatherings where I have to confront what so many other people do.
Well, sadly, no one, not too many people will be confronting family gatherings, period. I'll probably be spending Thanksgiving alone in my house. Well, maybe in my son's backyard, but yeah,
That's
holidays are going to be very
because
different this year.
yeah, that's because you're living the way you are. There are a lot of people are going to get together for Thanksgiving, and there'll be a lot of suffering afterward as a result.
Well, I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. It's
Thank
coming upon us. And thank you so much, Evan. And please thank your beautiful family for putting up with this for so long. But it
Thanks.
was wonderful to speak to you as always. And I wish you good health
All right.
through
Thanks.
this.
All right.
Take care, Evan. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.